fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got around the outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up top!
Oh my god! Oh. Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
This is very close. These guys are going to want to make their way through the field very quickly. This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
Good morning and welcome to the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12 hour. It is like Christmas morning. We are getting set for 12 hours of the mountain. And this is going to be wild. We had qualifying yesterday, a 90-minute session to set the back of the grid. A 15-car shootout that set the first 15 spots. And we saw plenty of twists and turns. And that was just qualifying. Today we do it properly. And we cannot wait. You're going to see the start and of the finish live right here on SimSpeed TV. My name is Ryan Jones. Alongside me, Lachlan Mansell. Jay Kennedy is behind the scenes on the cameras that can see very little but darkness right now. And it will be like that for the first lap or so as we race from dusk into the wee hours or the late hours of the afternoon. Plenty on offer for today as well because we've got some fantastic prizes from Logitech G and Astro Gaming up for grabs for every driver on the podium. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. Lachlan Mansell, how are you this morning? Are you ready for this one?
Morning, Ryan. Morning, everybody. Yeah, great to be here at Mount Panorama. Normally, of course, at this time of the year, we'd be heading to the mountain in real life for the 12-hour, but due to the ongoing border closures, we're not able to have the real world Bathurst 12-hour this year, but this is going to be a pretty good substitute. A big field of cars, jam-packed with high-quality talent from both the sim racing world and the real world, and in Bathurst 12-hour tradition, we're going to be starting in the dark at Mount Panorama and the sight of 51 GT3 cars roaring up mountain straight in the darkness for the first time. That is going to be a sight to behold.
And all I can do is pray they get through the first couple of laps cleanly. Before we roll off on our exciting formation laps, let's take a look then at the prizes that these drivers and teams are fighting for today. Logitech G and Astro Gaming have done a phenomenal job to pull these together, bringing the value up to about $5,000 in cash and prizes. And LGC Images have also jumped on board to support the series and promote. Here we go. First place per driver. Logitech G Pro X wireless headset, $150 in cash and a 12-hour trophy, which is pretty damn cool. I'd be happy with just one of all three of those, but you get all three of them. And great that it's per driver as well. No fighting over the scraps there. And I gotta say, second place isn't too shabby either. The Logitech G G733 wireless headset. A brilliant headset. $100 cash. Another trophy. And third place is just as good. I'd be happy with any of these three podium places because if you come home in third, you get an Astro A20 wireless headset, $50 cash, and a 12-hour trophy. So big thanks to Logitech G and Astro Gaming, Oceanic Sim Racing, Aussie Mixed and Fixed, and Smith & Sons, who've put it all together, who sponsored it, and who put us on the grid with just a couple minutes until our roll-off for 12 hours. How about them, Lockie?
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and well done to Logitech G for getting behind this event with some really fabulous prizes for our competitors, and it's going to be a hotly contested race regardless, but when you've got some prizes up for grabs at the end of it, I can't wait to see the fight for those final podium positions at the end of the 12-hour journey. So just a bit of an overview, Ryan, for how our race start procedure is going to work for the 12-hour. The manual safety car will shortly be moving off. There'll be 3 formational laps before the green flag waves. So one final opportunity for the drivers and teams to make sure their cars are all correctly set up. And the countdown time for the race has actually started at this stage. So, just with the iRacing software to ensure that everything can be managed as it needs to be, they've added a bit of extra time onto the countdown time just to include the start procedure phase of the race. So shortly we'll be getting underway for 3 warm-up laps. Each car in the field has either 3 or 4 drivers, and once the race gets underway, we'll talk a little bit more about the rules and regulations in regards to pit stops and driving times, and all of the other permutations and combinations that you have to think about in a long-distance endurance race like this one.
Yeah, and if there's a driver or a commentator I want alongside me who's good at stats and all those sorts of things, it is you, my friend. So let's look at the starting grid. Plenty of drama in qualifying. It was Jackson Susan Harlow dragged the United Sim Sports car to pole position with a phenomenal lap. Starting alongside them will be the Logitech G Altus Esports machine. Andrew Kyle put that car on the front row of the grid. It looks like James Scott will be starting that car, though, for this race. Evolution Racing Team number 26 are off P3. Ethan Grigol getting ready to roll off for the first of the Evolution Racing Team cars on the grid. And out of P4, it is R1 Sim Sports. John Peasnick at the wheel of that Ferrari. 2 BMWs on the front row, 2 Ferraris on row 2, Lockie.
Over the page, we go back to the entry of Scott Fountain, Ian Ford and Riley Preston out of position number 5 on the grid. Grid position number 6 will be occupied by the Trick Esports Pro Sim gear machine of Ross Rizzo, James Glaspool and Alexander Bird. 7th position on the grid, simrigs.com. Some names that will be familiar to those of our viewers who are avid V8 Scops watchers. Adam Briggs, Andrew Dyson and Philip Worley. Then out of 8th position it's Wayne Burke, Jordan Ross and Tom Freer. 9th position on the grid will be occupied by the TM Racing entry of Luke Turner, John Merritt, Dennis Gatterick and Glenn Riddell. And then rounding out the top 10 for Fusion Sim Racing, it's Nathan Huppertz, Josh Burden, a driver with real life Bathurst 12-hour experience, Andrew Gaines and Chris Hellett.
We had another 5 cars in the shootout. BMW Team SCHNITZEL will be from P11. Synergy Sim Racing 3 from P12. P13 goes the way of last-minute racing after Brody Kostecki had to do his lap in a Mercedes after accidentally joining in the wrong car. And then the car that was quickest in the 90-minute qualifying session, Astro Gaming Altus Esports, they've got some work to do from 14th on the grid. And Scott Nolan will be heading to the start of Synergy Sim Racing 2, another car that invited to the shootout lap and has to start from the back of the top 15. Zuba Racing are out of P16, XCM are out of P17. Talking from P18, NSR Esports over on P19, and Injectors Online Racing P20.
Moving back to position number 21, where we find the Fishy Motorsport machine of Jamie Dyke, Jamie McKnight and Rob Carmichael. Continuing to get through our grid positions nice and quickly here. Position number 22 for Drop Bear Motorsport, Daniel Yeaman, Corey McFarlane, Matty Johns and Brady Carr. Position number 23, the second of the simrigs.com entries for Daniel Misdale, Neil Pearson and Reece Keane. Then out of grid position number 24, it's Martin Crisp, Chris Hughes and Simon Nicholson for the XRC3. Position number 25, we've got Tim Crowley, Michael Brennan and Max Havett. Position number 26 for Mac 1 Esports, Jesse Butler, Kyle Bowen, Adam Gardner and Jamie Burnett. 27th on the grid we find Daniel Hall, Chad Lewis, Marco Pavic and Brooke Whiteman. In position number 28, Team Hyperdrive, Matthew Norris, Josh Morris, Kane Hewson and Kobe Jordan. 29th position on the grid will be Sean McNamara, Ben Saron and Kylie Zink. And then rounding out our top 30, Dave Clements, Lee Vandenberg and Timothy Febben.
One of the Team Gentlemen Sim Racing cars out of 31st. And then from 32nd, it is Fishy Motorsports 808 with Paul Warwick, Bradley Glenn and Blake Delaney. JTJ Racing 33rd, Jake Burgess, Josh Drage and Tim Nickel. And then 95 Sim Sports number 952 will line up just ahead of IPA Racing, who are from P34. XCM2 line up next, or XCM 101, Jai Potts, Dale Breed, and Justin Quinn. DT Racing from 37th, Tim Bollinger, Dean Grosjean, and Scott Connors. And then a flurry of Team Gentlemen Sim Racing cars, number 203, and then the number 87, and the number 201, all lining up together on the grid in 38th, 39th, and 40th. From 41st, Lockie, Team Hyperdrive, number 219, Cowpeck Racing, TD Sport, Angry Birds Racing, Real Bad Racing. That's not an observation. That's their name. Riot Sim Racing Black, AHR Endurance, Mola Esports, another Team Gentlemen Sim Racing car, number 204, the Banter Alliance, and the last, the Gentlemen's Sim Racing Club, number 202. So they've got the monopoly on the field, but up front with the pole, it's Jackson Harlow, United Sim Sports. They're on their sighting laps now, Lachlan. We're in the darkness. We are getting set for this race.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, the team's opting to put their experienced pilots in the respective cars for the opening stint. So Jackson, Suzel and Harlow will start car number 69. James Scott behind the wheel with car number 43. Ethan Grigols in car number 26 for the opening stint of the race. John Peisnick will start in car number 21. Riley Preston, Ross Rizzo, Philip Worley, Wayne Burke, and Dennis Gatterick. They're the drivers behind the wheel of the top 10 cars on the grid. Now, we were talking before about laps and ensuring that the driving time is shared between the drivers. So the way it's going to work is it'll be determined as a percentage of the total number of laps that are completed by each car at the end of the race. So for the 3 driver combinations, every driver must complete at least 25% of the distance completed by the car, and no one driver is allowed to complete more than 40% of the total race distance. For a 4-driver combination, it's a bit different. It's a minimum of 20% and a maximum of 35%. This tricky thing, Ryan, is working out exactly how many laps the race is going to be, because you're not going to know what the percentage is until you get to the end of the race and you know what the lap count is. So the teams are going to have to be a bit careful and just make sure that they share the driving around throughout the race. But I think one of the things that we can look at to give us a bit of an indication of how many laps the race might be today is to look at the number of laps that have completed in the real world 12-hour over the years. And the race distance record was actually set last year by the winning Bentley at 314 laps. So that kind of gives a bit of a ballpark number for the teams to look at when they're working out minimum and maximum numbers of laps per driver when they're calculating their strategy.
Plenty to pay attention to. I reckon this is the last of our formation laps. You can just see a bit of an orange tinge to the horizon as the sun starts to break through. It's 5:48 in sim time in Mount Panorama, Bathurst. And it's going to be really tricky to get through these opening couple of laps. 50 cars all together on the racetrack. It's dark. It's tough to see. The lights are trailblazing the way for you. There is potential for some issues. We are going to have, I would suggest, a safety car at some point today. There will be safety cars called for incidents that require them on track. We saw 4 red flags in qualifying yesterday, which was pretty cool, depending on how you look at it. We've also got random safety cars, a random number between 0 and 5. I don't know what it is. The drivers don't know what it is. So we could see those come out at some point as well, but we won't see a random safety car within 10 minutes of a legit, let's say, safety car. And that is the safety car there. The Porsche being driven by Simon Black at the moment. It's driven by Nick Parker in practice. In qualifying, sorry. And just hearing from Race Control, we are going to go racing at the end of this lap. Lockie, what are some of your final thoughts before we get this 12-hour underway?
I think probably the final thought before we get underway is you don't want to be taking too many risks too early on in the race. It's a 12-hour race. You're not going to win it in the first lap or even the first 5 or 10 laps, but you can certainly lose it. So, particularly in the darkness, particularly with visibility reduced, the drivers just need to creep on it. They don't need to be battling too ferociously or too aggressively for track position in the early stages. Like I said, it's not about trying to win the race in the first 5 laps or even the first hour. It's about buying a ticket to the last hour, making sure you're in a good position with your fastest driver in the car and with the minimum amount of fuel to put in at the final pit stop.
One thing you need for sure is a little bit of luck. You've already seen it for the I1 Sim Sports car. John Piesnick will start the car, but in qualifying, Reece Gasol absolutely creamed the outside of the car against the fence, exiting Forest Elbow. Somehow got away with it, somehow registered a lap, and starts that car from P4, does Piesnick. And you're going to need some of that luck throughout this race. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can't win this race. With how tight this place is, it can be traffic. It can be catching it in a bad spot. It can be coming through a corner, blinded, and coming across a stranded car. So many regions why this race can be lost. It's so hard to win, and that is why this is such a prestigious race, both in real life and in the sim. We won't see it in real life this year, but this race should just about make up for it. Thanks to Logitech G, Astro Gaming, OSR, and Aussie Mixed and Fixed. The Smith & Sons, Bathurst 12-hour, in the hands of the starter, waiting on the green flag. Jackson Harlow, United Sim Sports on pole. Logitech G Altus Esports alongside, with James Scott at the wheel. Here we go. Green flag is called, and away we go for 12 hours of the mountain. And already, in the background, a few drivers looking to make it 3 wide. James Scott just sneaks ahead of Ethan Gregault through turn 1. That was very tight between them, and trying to warm the tyres and get some temp into them as Harlow, down mountain straight we go, and in towards Griffin's Bend. In fact, he's just covering off because that Altus Esports car was quite close. Ducks back to the racing line. The top half a dozen single file. Preston slightly offline back there in 6th for Evolution Racing Team. The first half of the field's got through there cleanly. Somehow, I think we've gotten through the first couple of corners without incident, so across the top for the first time, Lockie. And look at those cars roaring through. What a sight. We've got an incident.
Oh, no!
No,
over
that's
the top of the mountain. Reid Park, by the looks of it, or just on the approach as they head down the hill out of Silman Park and towards McPhillamy, and that's taken out a number of the runners sort of in the mid-pack to the rear of the field, and a lot of cars with quite a bit of damage there. So we were talking about the fact that most of the field had managed to get through the opening lap cleanly, but with such a tightly congested pack, unfortunately, there was a bit of an incident over the top of the mountain. And look at this, massive congestion and drivers having to do 3 and 4 and 5 point turns to get themselves back out onto the racetrack proper. Do we manage to get all of the cars off the racetrack out of harm's way? I think we might just about be able to there, Ryan, which, no, the safety car has actually been called. So race control have decided that just due to the number of cars that were involved in that incident and the potential that there might be the race leaders approaching stranded vehicles at the top, that the safety car has had to be called. We'll go looking for some replays thanks to SimSpeed TV to see if we can pick up exactly what caused that incident.
exactly what I was talking about. Lap 1. So difficult to get through in the darkness with this many cars. And when it does kick off, it's almost impossible for any cars behind to avoid it. because this place is so narrow. Thanks to Atom Simulation, we'll see this replay, as you mentioned, up at Reed Park. It happened, and I wonder if it was the cause of a sole driver's mistake or a couple trying to go side by side. Right now, that's already looking a little bit risky. Gianni Satiro trying to get up the inside at Reed Park, grabs the curb, and I tell you what, those are some big impacts, but I think just too ambitious on lap 1. Didn't need to shove that car up the inside there.
Well, yeah, those two cars really didn't need to be running side by side across the top of the mountain. They should have been working together to make sure that they got into single file. You're not going to go too wide through Reed Park at any stage of the race, and certainly not on lap number 1 in the dark. So, yeah, unfortunately, it's taken out some innocent victims as well that would have been coming down the hill completely unsighted with nowhere to go. And as we have a look at timing just to see how many cars were affected. So car 100, car number 78, car 87, car 150, car 76, 808, 144, and car number 50 were among the victims in that incident. Actually, surprisingly, not too many cars that have had to come back into the pits. I think probably about 7 or 8 cars that have been affected by that, but thankfully all of our race leaders have been able to make it through there relatively unscathed, as we have a look at the onboard replay from Chad Vicker there in car number 48.
Chad Vicker was one of the culprits for the red flags yesterday in qualifying. That one, this time, was not his fault. Good to note, though, with the, I guess, heightened chances for those sorts of incidents on the sim compared to real life, they've got 2 fast repairs available to them, or spare cars, if you will. So I think that's a good move on the part of the race organisers. We know we're going to get those sorts of incidents in a sim race, and with a 12-hour race, it is just unnecessary, I think, for cars to be out on lap 1. So even those with big damage can tow back to the pits if they couldn't drive back, and they can use that fast repair. I'll tell you who was involved in it. The Gentlemen Sim Racing Club cars. Pretty much all of them involved in that crash in some form or another, which is pretty unfortunate for that big team, but that spare car will save them, as we are going to get the green this time back. Safety car is going to pull away, and Jackson Susan Harlow this time will get to choose when he goes. They won't be waiting on the starter's orders, and that may give him a little bit more breathing room over that Altus Esports car behind. You can already see how much it's lightened up down the bottom of this circuit. Sun starting to come over the horizon a little bit more. Here we go. Pace car's out of the way. Harlow's in control. It's a really unfortunate time to blink out as we go back green. He's back, and the racing is back under green flag conditions. Into turn 1, there's going to be no changes for your front few cars.
And unsurprisingly, Ryan, none of the front runners chose to come into the pits under that safety car. It's still too early in the race. They wouldn't have burned down much of their initial starting fuel load at all. And the advantage that you might get from putting on a couple of extra litres of fuel is going to be very much offset by the massive amount of track position that you will lose if you had chosen to stop under that safety car. So all status quo at the front of the field. What do we reckon fuel range is for these cars? An hour or thereabouts, maybe a bit more, depending on safety car interruptions?
Someone let us know. There's a reason I'm commentating this and not driving it. I can't last long enough to ever find out how long these GT cars will make it around Mount Panorama. Someone in the YouTube chat, maybe Bo's watching, one of our SimSpeed commentators, who's also rumoured to be a semi-decent driver, maybe not so much at Bathurst, might let us know. His teammate, Cooper Webster, is in the car. He's up to P12, had to start 14th, messed up qualifying the shootout. He was the quickest in qualifying, though, and I'd say he'll have the pressure on himself to perform here and make up for the ground he's lost his teammates. Luckily, safety cars are going to mean that it's not all reliant on the first stint, but you still don't want to be starting this race on the back foot and handing over about half a minute behind the race leaders.
You don't, but at the same time, you also don't need to be impatient with picking your way through the field, because you've got 12 hours to make up spots, and we've got a big crash coming down into the S's with at least 3 cars involved, and a bit of a push job there to get the number 204 Ferrari back on 4 wheels. And once again, those cars are going to have to do some 3-point turns to get themselves going again. That's big damage to car number 204. Unfortunately, Jeremy Wheeler behind the wheel of that one. Riding
Wheeler's... Yeah?
Sorry, with Luke Rosella at the moment, car number 13. He's just in behind Josh Burden, who we've seen behind the wheel of Nissan GTRs at the Bathurst 12 hour in years past. Cooper Webster has managed to get ahead of Josh Burden, so Cooper Webster up to 11th position, and of course Webster coming off the back of his real-life racing debut in the S5000 class down at Simmons Plains in Tasmania last weekend. Here's Cooper Murray. He's worked his way up into 9th position. Cooper Murray, another driver with a lot of real-world racing experience in the Porsche Carrera Cup. He'll be sharing that car with a couple of his real-life racing counterparts in Cody Bircher and also Erebus Motorsport Supercars driver Brody Kostecki.
Some very strong driver combinations. We saw that shunt over at Skyline. Jeremy Wheeler involved. He's not had a good start to this event. Was maybe one of the big reasons why the Talk Inc. car of Mitchell McLeod didn't make it into the shootout. And he's just had another incident at the chase, by the sounds of it, over the radio. I was limping through the chase, not flipping. I've just picked him up on my screens. He's limping back to pit lane. And Paul Warwick's been given a black flag for the opening lap incident, it would seem. And now hearing of a crash at the elbow, courtesy of the driver chat. Luke Rosella's found the fence. BMW Team Schnitzel, he's facing the wrong way. He's in the tyre bundle. He's going to get it going. No, he's not. Go back, go back. This is an awkward spot.
Yeah, the problem there is he's going to have to wait for pretty much the entire field to go past before he can turn the car around. And it's always a nervous moment because you don't want to be driving into a line of oncoming traffic, and that's a pretty precarious spot to park right at the apex. Now, he should be able to get going once he waits for the next couple of cars to get through, and he does.
Tell you what, that's some of the best awareness I've ever seen on iRacing from Luke Rosella.
He was running just outside the top 10, but he's fallen all the way back to 45th position. Here's a look at what happened. So, he was in behind Josh Burden, and it looks like he's just... the car gets unsettled very easily through that section of the circuit as you head down to Forest Elbow, because you're both turning and braking at the same time. Very easy to get crossed up, and yeah, I think Luke Rosella was maybe just a fraction too far to the right-hand side of the circuit there when he jumped on the brakes. The good news is that he managed to wash off most of the speed before impacting the wall there at Forest Elbow with the rear of the car, and he has fallen all the way back to 45th position.
Wayne Burke up in P6, tucked up behind the Evolution Racing Team machine of Riley Preston at the moment as they whip down the mountain. Burke's the faster of the two at the moment, but he hasn't got the pace advantage to just go by. You've got to be significantly quicker to easily make a move at any racetrack, and least of which being Bathurst, because from cutting to Forest Elbow, it's pretty much single file only. Please do not attempt to pass, and you've got to get it done down at the bottom of the mountain. Something which isn't the best place if your superiority is not at the bottom of the mountain. It can make life very tricky for you. And you can see down the straight that even with the slipstream, Wayne Burke gained very little time at all over Riley Preston in front. So he's going to be working away at making this overtake for quite a little while, I suspect, over the next few laps. Update at the front, it's a 1 second margin for Jackson Harlow over James Scott at the completion of what is registered as lap 10 in the sim that includes outlap and the formation laps. Ethan Grigault is third, hanging on to them at 1.9 seconds away. Top three have pretty much broken away. A bit of a gap back to John Piesnik and the rest from 4th on back. Lockie, we reckon about 35 laps, 30 to 35 laps for the BMW. Going to be slightly harder to judge with the extra laps you've got at the start of this race, but that's the rough ballpark we're looking at, as here's a potential move for Cooper Webster on the brakes. He's decisive with his overtakes, and he's gone past Dennis Gaderick there of TM Racing, and the Astro Gaming Altus machine is up to P10.
This goes to show, doesn't it, how hard it is to make up positions, though, when you're buried back in the pack. We saw how fast Cooper Webster was in qualifying, but he's only just now broken into the top 10, so a pretty tough opening stint for young Cooper, but like you say, he's been very decisive with his passing manoeuvres. He's not making half chances, he's making sure that they're fully committed and completed passing manoeuvres, and then he just has to keep picking them off one after the other. Fastest lap of the race so far, 2 minutes 2.1 for our race leader Jackson Suzel and Harlow. And the advantage that he has, of course, in this opening stint is the fact that he's got clear track, he's got clean air, he's not tucked up under the rear wing of anybody else and getting affected by the turbulent aerodynamic disturbance that you will get in these GT3 cars because of their high levels of downforce. So he's just managing the gap at the moment. Jackson Suzel and Harlow back to 2nd place, James Scott. And as we say, that Cooper Webster, having disposed of Gaderick, is now applying the pressure to Ross Rizzo in the contest for 9th and 10th position, flat out through the chase. Hard under brakes for the left-hander. He's not quite close enough, Cooper Webster, to make the move there. And meanwhile, Ross Rizzo is applying the pressure to the simrigs.com entry of Philip Morley, who sits in 8th position.
Bit of mistake for John Peasnick on this lap. He's dropped 2 spots. He just caught the tail of it there as Burke got by, and that's why he dropped the car off onto the grass coming out of the chase. That allowed Riley Preston to get by, and Wayne Burke capitalised down at Murray's Corner as well. Here's the replay from above.
Looks like he was probably just a little bit too deep under brakes into the chase here. He didn't quite get the car pulled up. You could say that he was maybe half a car width wide of the apex and drops the right wheels out into the grass. That cost him some momentum, and because there were a couple of cars close behind at the time, it has cost him a couple of positions.
Dropped another one now to Cooper Webster as well. Black flag's been issued to Darren McKenzie for the incident we saw at Skyline. I don't like seeing cars go side by side through the cutting. Will Orton, I think, was one of those two involved. Did a good job to get through there. And Thomas Hinds, the other party in the picture. The Ferrari versus BMW for P14, Lachlan.
Yeah, battles everywhere that you look at the moment. And it's pretty hotly contested opening stint of the race. Look at this battle here that's going on at the moment.
Oh, that's a lap
car. We've got a lapped car in that one, yeah, yep. And that has allowed Ethan Grigot to close right up onto the tail of James Scott. So that lapped car of Paul Nichols just needs to sidestep to the left-hand side of Conrod Straight, the Gentleman's Sim Racing Club entry, which he now does. But that's going to awkwardly position Scott and Grigot as they get to the kick, because they're going to have to turn in with a slightly narrower approach line than they would like. And Ethan Grigot applying the blowtorch to James Scott. Normally we see these drivers behind the wheel of supercars in the V8 Scots Championship. They're proving themselves to be pretty handy in GT machinery as well.
That's allowed Harlow to skip away out front and pull out 3.8 seconds. Didn't expect lap cars to make impacts to the leaders this early on, but it's happened, and we'll continue to see it right through to the checkered flag in just under 12 hours' time. It's advantaged Harlow now, but I can almost guarantee at some point it's going to disadvantage Harlow as well. There is the talking car I touched upon a little earlier on. Mitchell McLeod qualified, and he's at the wheel for the start of the race. Tucked up ahead of Daniel Yeaman at the moment, and in behind Scott Nolan of Synergy Sim Racing, who's not had a good start to this race. He started out a P8, and he's currently running 16th.
So Mitchell McLeod then, the best placed of the Lamborghini Huracan entries in the field at this stage. We've got a selection of GT3 cars in at the Bathurst 12 hour. Most of the front-running teams have opted for either the Ferrari 488 GT3 or the BMW M4 GT3, but we do also have some Lamborghinis and some Mercedes AMG GT3 cars in the field. One car conspicuous by its absence in the virtual Bathurst 12 hour was the Audi R8, which is a car that is available on the iRacing platform, but no teams have elected to go for an Audi for the Bathurst 12 hour ride, which is quite interesting when you consider that it's been one of the mainstays of the real life Bathurst 12 hour over the last decade or so.
Yeah, there's certainly not all of the GT3s and iRacing out there being represented today. A little bit surprised, and whoa, a little bit surprised at that. 3 wide over the crest at the Conrod Straight. That was Paul Nicholls continuing to get lapped now by the rest of the field and making life ever so difficult for everyone to get by. That was Riley Preston and Cooper Murray, I think, that got caught 3 abreast with him for a minute. Wayne Burke's gotten through, John Piesnick's gotten through, Nicholls is keeping it on the racing line, which depends on your outlook. Is that the way to go, or should, with how slow he is at the moment, be getting right out of the way?
I think that in the end, when you're a backmarker like that, the thing that you have to do is make sure that you're predictable with where you position the car on the racetrack. Where you do get incidents between the race leaders and backmarkers is generally when the backmarker does something that the other cars are not expecting them to do. So I think the key for Paul Nicholls is to make a decision, make it clear what his decision is, and stick to it. And we've got a change in second position here, so this has been brewing for a couple of laps, and it's finally happened. Ethan Rigold up the inside of James Scott into Griffin's Bend. He'd been stalking James Scott, as I said, for a few laps, and he's finally been able to make the passing manoeuvre work at turn 2, Griffin's Bend at the top of Mountain Straight. But while these two have been battling, they've been bleeding time to our race leader. It's now almost 4.5 seconds that Jackson Suzel and Harlow has established over the cars that are battling behind him. And John Piesnick, we said that he lost a couple of spots, is now in danger of losing even more positions because he's got a very fast and fired up Cooper Webster on his tail as they head down into Forest Elbow.
And this should be a move down at the chase pretty comfortably. Piesnick looks like he almost whacked the fence then coming out of Forest Elbow. In fact, this is going to happen down Conrod Straight. Superiority for sure for Astro Gaming Ultra Sports. Webster's their fastest driver. He's in the car, doing the job at the moment, climbing his way further and further into the top 10 as he sneaks on by and puts the BMW into 7th place on the leaderboard. 10 seconds away from the race lead of Harlow. P4 though is still very lively. In fact, Cooper Murray's just gotten by Riley Preston. So that's a switch. Last minute racing up and Evolution Racing Team 13 down.
Cooper Murray's got serious pace at the moment. That car started outside the top 10, but Cooper Murray's worked his way up into 4th position. So this has been a mega opening stint from young Cooper Murray as we see Thomas Hinds and Glenn Postlethwaite going at it for positions 13 and 14. That was very tight between those cars as they negotiated their way around Hill Corner. You've got Josh Burden a little bit further up the road. Scott Nolan is involved in this contest as well. Side by side cars heading into Griffin's Bend. A couple of lapped cars, I think, involved in that dice as well.
Yep, Taron Anderson just fired out of pit lane right into the Hornet's nest. He's trying to stay wide, but he's trying to let cars go at the cutting. It's always awkward. Will Orton sneaks through, so does Mitchell McLeod and Daniel Yeaman. He's done a phenomenal job there to get out of the way. This is a hungry pack of cars. Postlethwaite fending off the advances of Thomas Hinds from Hell Corner. Scott Nolan and Will Orton and McLeod and Yeaman are all in a very competitive frame of mind. And it looks as I tell you what, Daniel Yeaman's had quite the start to the race. P26 up to 18. He's got the pace over McLeod and we're looking to make it yet another spot. This Drop Bear Motorsport car's motoring forward.
Daniel Yeaman, we've seen that he's had some really good results in GT cars in the past. We saw that he was one of the front runners in the SpeedCafe.com GT3 E-Series that ran during the lockdown period last year. Also won a competition by the Sim Racing Oz website and got to turn some laps on Tom Randall's Dream Motorsport sim rig down in Melbourne. So Daniel Yeaman doing a good job of working that car forward a few positions from where it qualified. Not even half an hour into the race yet, Ryan. It's going to be a long and grueling affair at Mount Panorama, but based on the ferocity of some of the action that we've seen so far, you get the feeling this is going to be like a 12-hour sprint race for some of these drivers.
Been the way of endurance races lately, hasn't it? Instead of being endurance races, they're turning into just grueling sprints of 12, 24 hours in length. And honestly, I'm not complaining. It's been quite good fun to watch. This should be interesting down at Griffin's Bend. Hinzie getting close to the back of Postlethwaite. Orton getting close to the back of Scott Nolan. Orton's having a look. Hinzie's staying behind. Nolan's going to lose out as NSR Esports sneaks through, courtesy of Orton. Later on the brakes. That's a good move from him. Nice and controlled. And the slide continues down the order for Nolan and Synergy Sim Racing 2. They're going to have to tune that car up somewhat if they can. Figure out what's going wrong, because this is not a good opening stanza to the race. And Mitchell McLeod's going to be next in line to try and pick off the struggling Synergy machine. Provided he doesn't previously lose out to Daniel Yeaman. Probably these three cars are currently ordered slowest to fastest, I would suggest, heading down the mountain. Which always makes for some interesting spice.
Light level starting to lift here at Mount Panorama as the sun continues to rise. Great to see, as always, as we've become accustomed to, some very distinctive colour schemes on a lot of the cars in the field. Good to see that some of them have got LED lights to make them stand out as well, and we've had an incident for Martin Christ. That's at Sorman Park. Let's have a look at what's happened here. I wonder if he's just taken a bit too much curb heading down the hill. Or maybe got a bit wide of the ideal line. It's actually started a bit further up. Yes, it has. So at Reid Park there. Looks like he might have clipped the curb on the left-hand side just as he crested the rise. That's unsettled the car. And unfortunately, he's waxed the wall on at the left-hand side of the road. He's been able to continue on, though. But he might well be pit-bound this time around to get some damage to that car addressed, or perhaps it's not too bad and he's able to press on with it.
I'm just spying a move for Zuva Racing. Thomas Hins trying again to get by Glenn Postlethwaite, who this time cannot defend because he's on the outside of turn 2, and Hinzie is through. The outside of turn 2, probably the least favoured corner to be on the outside of this track. I would take any corner other than that. There's just no grip on the outside of Griffin's Bend. Here's a replay of how he got it done.
It's not just the fact that there's no grip, Ryan, it's the fact that the camber of the road changes and it drops away as well. So if you run out over that curb on the outside, it actually sucks you towards the wall. And there was another move happening simultaneously as well. That was Daniel Yeaman getting ahead of the Lamborghini of Mitchell McLeod.
That was a really good move as well. A decisive up the inside of the cutting. And it looked for a minute like Postlethwaite was going to try and fight on the outside like he did at Hell Corner a few laps ago, but he just couldn't keep the car there. He gave up, recognised the spot was lost, and he'll tuck in and maybe try to follow Hins for a little while. And now that Yeaman's been released from Mitchell McLeod, he'll look to charge forward up to the back of Scott Nolan and Will Orton. Battle for P8. John Peasnick. Yeah, 4 tenths clear of Philip Worley here, Lockie.
He's been struggling for a bit of pace in this opening stint. We saw that he lost a few spots a couple of laps ago, and he's fallen back into the clutches of the simrigs.com commentary of Philip Worley now as well. So John Peasnick, who's on board one of the cars that's been described as one of the race favourites today, not quite having the pace to run with the front runners in this opening stint. Interesting as well, Ryan, to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the different cars. It's something that we talk about every year in real life at the Bathurst 12 Hour, and GT3 cars are, of course, regulated to a balance of performance formula. But even so, they are going to have strengths and weaknesses in different parts of the circuit. So, at the moment, the BMWs and the Ferraris seem to be fairly evenly matched. The Lamborghini, though, maybe not quite as quick as either of those cars. And like I said before, we don't have any Audis in the field for this particular race. Normally the Audis are very quick through the corners and over the top of the mountain, but they don't quite have the straight line performance in some of the other cars. So this is a battle for positions 35 and 36. Simon Francis and Jamie Chastain.
Chasty. We see Chasty a lot on Sim Speed TV, Lockie, and the Aussie car Skippies on a Thursday night. I call him Chasty now purely because his last name is just too much of a pain to flick through every time we see him in action, which is often a lot. Yeah, he's also colloquially known by his mates on the YouTube chat as Chasty, so that's another reason. But he's in the thick of it again here. He's got Letchford behind and Simon Francis in front. And this has not been a good start for our friend here at Sim Speed. He's back to 36 after starting 14th. So he's tumbled a lot.
And he's not made any pit stops either, so potentially he's had an incident at some stage during this opening stint that we might have missed, but it's cost him some track position. It's in those early stages, and we saw it earlier on, didn't we, with that car that spun at Forest Elbow, that if you do get it wrong and drop positions, or if you make a mistake and you end up off the road, like we saw with Luke Rosella at Forest Elbow, because the field is still quite tightly bunched at the moment, you can lose a lot of positions in pretty rapid succession if you do get it wrong.
What do we see there? It was a move for Daniel Yeaman getting by Scott Nolan at turn 1. And while he was doing that, McLeod's actually been able to consolidate his pace, and he was following Yeaman quite closely. And he might use that to get by Nolan as well while he's on the back foot. He had a little slip up coming out of turn 2, but there's not enough room for McLeod to squeeze his Lamborghini through. I'm really disappointed we don't see more Lamborghinis in this race because I love them. But between the two new cars, the Service and GT3's Lamborghini and the BMW, well, it's not hard to see which one's been favoured.
Only fairly recent additions to the iRacing platform, both of those cars. I have to say as well that Lamborghini was famous for one of the most unusual incidents that we've seen at Mount Panorama. If you think back to qualifying for the Bathurst 12-hour last year, Ryan, when Dean Canto backed it up on top of the wall at McPhilmy Park, and in fact Simon Feigl, one of the prominent figures in the sim racing scene and the owner of the OSR Esports team, has actually created a competition in his Facebook group to challenge drivers to try and replicate that incident on the iRacing platform and take a screenshot of it. Not during this race, of course. We don't want to be seeing people trying to back their Lamborghini up onto the wall during the 12 hours today, but in their own practice sessions.
If someone manages to do it in this race by accident, I will be astounded, and it will be the cover photo of iRacing Down Under without a shadow of a doubt, because any attempts thus far have clearly been purposefully curated. If you do it by accident in this one, well, that's Recreation 101, doing it in the 12-hour. We just saw Paul Nichols getting absolutely mugged in a straight line by the lead lap cars. The Gentlemen's Sim Racing Club 202 is in for a long-haul race. First car 2 laps down, riding 50th at the moment. Thomas Hinds, Glenn Postlethwaite and Will Orton all getting by him on Conrod Straight. There's Orton with the late switch to the inside, putting the pressure on Postlethwaite, who stands firm in his attack of the circuit, not willing to just let drivers go by. He's going to fight them without being too risky in what he does. He's just hitting his marks, using the racing line and making the car behind work for the position.
New fastest lap of the race that was recorded last time around as well. Cooper Murray, our 4th place driver. I mentioned earlier on the progress that he'd made from his starting position and the fact that he seemed to have a pretty decent turn of speed in that car, and he has actually just punched out a 2-minute 2.1, which pretty much just eclipses by a couple of hundredths of a second the best time set by our race leader Jackson Suzel and Harlow in the early laps of the race. So Suzel and Harlow with the margin of 5 seconds back to Ethan Griggolt who continues to battle away with James Scott. Those two cars still separated by only about half a second. Cooper Murray a further 4 seconds back or thereabouts in 4th position, but with clear track at his disposal and plenty of pace on board as well.
Let's go on board with Will Orton here. Let's go for a lap around Mount Panorama as he tries to chase down Glenn Postlethwaite. You can see the sun tinging the horizon orange. You can see Postlethwaite running a little bit wide into the chase, and Orton now going to set up for a move, but Postlethwaite's defending in that Stingy Sim Racing car. He positioned that car beautifully. He got to the racing line, but he just opened the steering up coming out of the chase and hung the car a bit further to the left, and it dissuaded Orton from making the move. And it's pretty textbook stuff and a good display of how to defend in an endurance race without putting yourself off in terms of lap times.
And Will Orton, good sensible heads-up driving as well. He saw that Postlethwaite was a bit wide, but rather than poking his nose up the inside, he was content just to sit back. He knows that it's a long race, but here it goes. Big attack under brakes at Griffin's Bend up the inside. Postlethwaite was just a little bit deep and a little bit wide on the approach, and Orton will make the move through and get the job done. So, good job there from Will Orton. He'd been keeping the pressure on Glenn Postlethwaite. He saw the opportunity to make a clean, incisive move, was there at Griffin's Bend, and he's threw it up into position 14.
How about that for a first-person perspective of how to set up a move and execute it at Mount Panorama. Brilliantly well done from Orton, as you mentioned, showing patience where he needed, and then showing his angry side as he snuck up the inside at turn. So I paused for a moment there. I heard someone clip the fence. I reckon it was coming down Skyline with the right-hand side of the car, but I see no incidents. Everyone's gotten away with it. We saw in qualifying plenty of cars nicking the fence here and there. We saw Reese Gasol smashing the fence and somehow registering a lap. We saw Cooper Webster hit it 3 times without really damaging the car, but it was enough to invalidate the lap. That's why he's back in 6th at the moment, and why he was even further back at the start of the race. And we saw Nathan Huppitz as well, I think, just raise up against the fence at the cutting. So it's something that's very easy to do with all the concrete lined around the circuit at the top of Mount Panorama, really giving it the street circuit vibe. As we are on board with one of the Ultra Sports cars here, James Scott in 3rd. After Grigol got by Lockie, he's not let him get away. He's hanging really tough with him here.
These two cars have been inseparable pretty much from the start of the race, and they're continuing their duel for 2nd position. They're now some 5.5 seconds behind our race leader Jackson Sousa and Harlow. Meanwhile, it's Cooper Webster in 6th position, who now punches out the fastest lap of the race, getting down to a 2-minute 2.0 lap time. So as the fuel load burns down and the cars start to get lighter, the pace is continuing to improve in these cars. And at the moment, it seems like if your name's Cooper, you're going pretty quickly, because both Cooper Webster and Cooper Murray have recorded some scorching lap times. So Will Orton, who we were on board with before, he's actually a genetic driver in real life over in the UK. Good to have him here as part of the virtual Bathurst 12 hour today. Now, one of the other things that we need to think about, Ryan, we've talked about pit stops and fuel range, and the fact that we're expecting the cars to go anywhere between 30 and 35 laps on a tank of fuel. But this is GT racing, so during pit stops, that means that you're not allowed to do fuel and tyres simultaneously. So if you want to take a fresh set of tyres, it is going to add some extra time to your pit stop. What we see in real life in the Bathurst 12 hour is that teams will often double stint a set of tyres to save themselves some time in the pit, so that they're not having to change tyres at every stop. And it'll be interesting to see how the teams approach tyre strategy throughout this virtual Bathurst 12 hour as well.
Yeah, I can say without a doubt, Lockie, we're going to see teams double stinting their tyres, triple stinting potentially, and quadruple stinting. I doubt, but it is a possibility, I would suggest. We know teams quad stinted at Daytona in the 24 hour just past. So it is a possibility, but I would say this track is a little bit more demanding on its tyres than the Daytona course, which features about 2.5 miles of flat-out circuit on the oval. And I want to note as well, that sun in a minute is going to become a bit of a problem, as is Daniel Gaiman for Glenn Postlethwaite. As you come down Skyline, the sun's starting to peak over the horizon there and past the trees, and if you've got HDR on in your sim, it is absolutely blinding when it gets completely visible. Right now, there's no rays coming off it, but I'll tell you what, we'll go an onboard shot in a few laps' time, and it will be a pretty blinding light. So,
yeah, and that's something that applies to the Rail World Bathurst 12 hour in the opening stint as well. One of the other things that we've seen time and time again in the early laps of the Rail Life Bathurst 12 hour is there's typically been at least one car have to retire from the race early on due to a collision with the Kangaroo. Thankfully, the Kangaroos seem to have stayed away from Mount Panorama today.
Yeah, they call this a sim, but where are the Kangaroos? It can't be an endurance race at Bathurst without a kangaroo or two. I wonder if anyone's sporting a kangaroo on their livery. Maybe that should be our goal for the broadcast, is to try and find a livery with a kangaroo. For God's sake, Jay, it took you 3 seconds and you've ruined our game. Thank you. Well, there's a kangaroo. Found one.
Few cars sporting kangaroo liveries in the Bathurst 12 hour. The lap times continue to tumble. Our race leader Jackson Souzel and Harlow, first driver to punch out a sub 2-minute 2 lap time, 2-minute 1.9 for Jackson Souzel and Harlow. But as I say that, it's just been eclipsed by Cooper Webster. So as the ambient light increases and it becomes a little bit easier for the drivers to pick their braking markers and their turning points and their racing lines around the circuit, and also as the fuel loads continue to burn down on these cars, the pace is getting pretty rapid. We're starting to see drivers punching out some very fast lap times. In fact, pretty much all of the cars in the top 6 have done times sort of 2 minutes and 2.2 seconds or quicker. So some serious pace on board all of our front runners at the moment.
Oh, the attitude of the cars as they come out of the tree never gets old as they slide towards the fence and somehow, mostly, miss it as well. Peacenik's really starting to struggle. Dennis Gaderick is going to get by in a minute as well. We just saw Philip Worley sneak through. And this is not something I would expect from Peacenik. He's a very good driver. That whole team should be very competitive R1 Sim Sports, but they've just not got it right in the early stages of this race. And Gaderick and Ross Rizzo are lining up to have a crack at the back of that R1 Sim Sports Ferrari. Luckily, behind Rizzo, there's a 6-second gap to the next car in line, which is the Fusion Sim Racing machine driven by Josh Burden. So there will be a little bit of a reprieve for the struggling Peacenik, as here goes Gaderick inside of the chase, and that's a very nice restrained move. Hearing as well the fuel number might be slightly less than we expected, about 28, 27, maybe 30 laps, depends how aggressive you are with your fuel in terms of the stint length. Of course, it will be extended because we had a few formation laps and a safety car as well. There's a replay of Cooper Webster nudging his car into the top 5.
So Cooper Webster's been on the move, and so too has Cooper Murray. So that was Cooper Webster getting past Riley Preston. So that will bring the two Coopers nose to tail. John Peacenik now under pressure from Ross Rizzo. So continuing to bleed some spots is John Peacenik. He's going to be shuffled outside the top 10 shortly if he's not careful. And check out the sunlight on the road as they head up out of Griffin's Bend. I'm hearing as well from Brenton O'Brien, the team manager at the Evolution Racing team. He reckons that there's absolutely no chance today that we'll see teams try and quadruple stint. He said that because the weather conditions are quite warm, even at triple stinting, there's pretty much no chance as well. So he reckons that about 2 stints would be the maximum length of time that anybody would want to spend on a set of tyres. And that perfectly illustrates, Ryan, the sun glare that you were talking about before as the cars crest Skyline and plunge down through the S's. It's going to become a real problem for these drivers in terms of visibility and in terms of being able to pick where they are on the racetrack.
It's just occurred to me. I was wondering why Brenton's messaging you. You've probably got a working relationship with Brenton O'Brien professionally, don't you?
Somewhat, yeah. Winton
his
Motor
duties
Raceway, yeah.
Brenton, yeah. Good to see Brenton still involved with sim racing and really using his sim racing expertise to land that gig, as far as I'm aware as well, which was fantastic to see. Sim racing personalities, not just the drivers, moving into the real world.
And that was Ross Rizzo up the inside of John Peasnick into the chase. So Ross Rizzo breaks into the top 10 at the expense of John Peasnick, who really hasn't had the pace, has he, in this opening stint of the race. So he's now been shuffled all the way back. The driver of the R1 Sid Sports machine, which started this race out of 4th on the grid, has now slipped back to position 11.
So the light is now blinding, heading down Skyline, and that is just something for the drivers to contend with. Luke Rosella in 32nd. We saw him facing the wrong way and in all sorts of trouble at Forest Elbow in the early laps. He's recovered quite nicely. He had to drop almost to last, didn't he? But he's passed quite a few cars to be 32nd.
I think he got back, to about 45th at one stage, so he's done a good job to make up spots, but it just shows you, doesn't it, how hard it is to try and pick your way through traffic, especially when you've got cars that are having their own battles for position. Rosella finds himself with a wall of Ferraris ahead.
That was Luke Swan trying to have a lunge at Curtis Porter, who shut the door and then promptly ran wide at the same time, which checked all of them up, as I've just spotted Tyler Bowen coming in for Mark 1 Esports. It's the first car that I've seen coming into the pits. And that's on lap 25, a lot earlier than I would expect, especially with the safety car laps that we ran, but could be eyeing up a strategy that gets them to the end where they want. Luke Swan has just lost out, so Rosella's picked up another spot. And Martin Crisp there on the back foot as well. Wonder if he's made another issue as we take a look at a Motor Simulation replay. No, in fact, he's made a spot up. Good move. Pick up Luke Rosella again, because he's still hunting to get by Curtis Porter. And look at this train behind as well. Luke Swan, who's got the pace on Porter. We saw that at the chase, but he has to wait for Rosella to get out of the way first. And then Phil Letchford and Simon Chadwick are back there as well and looking reasonably fast. In fact, Letchford's previous lap was 2 seconds quicker than the car in front.
And these battles outside the top 30, so just goes to show how fierce the competition is all the way through this field. Doesn't matter if you're battling at the pointy end or you're racing somewhere in the mid-pack, chances are there's going to be other cars that you'll be fighting with for position.
Exactly right, and here we go. Rosella's got the run. This should be a Schnitzel passing the Gentleman Sim Racing Club car very easily up Conrad Straight, and behind, I reckon there's a decent chance of a Phil Letchford dive up the inside of Luke Swan as well. Pulls to the inside for the kink and promptly decides that is not the best idea he's ever had. Gives it a dab of the brakes and just waits a little bit longer.
So Luke Rosella's best time in the race, 2:02.9, which is the sort of pace that should see him running inside the top 10, but due to that early...
We got a safety car, Lockie, sorry. Safety car has just been deployed, and I wonder, with no incidents on the track, if this is one of the random safety cars. And random indeed, it's come just 48 minutes into this race between 0, clearly not happening, or 5 safety car random interventions, and this is number 1 of who knows how many, as Harlow's using it to his advantage to dive into the pits from the lead of the race. How many will shadow him?
I reckon everyone.
Yeah, yep. It's just shy of the fuel that we were given. So, yeah, here we go. Gregult's in, Scott's in.
Yeah, this has come at a perfect time for most of the teams because they would have been just about out of fuel anyway. So I reckon at this point you'll just see just about the entire field come in to get one of their pit stops out of the way. Now, there's no compulsory pit stops per se in the Bathurst 12 hour. You can make as many or as few pit stops as what you need to get to the end of the race. And Cooper Murray, he's stayed out on the track, so he's elected not to come in, so he will take the lead of the race.
As has Dennis Gaterick. Talk about saved by the bell. Remember that Mark 1 Esports car I spied in pit lane? Tyler Bowen. He should be getting a wave around here. He was a lap down. And he's now being told to pass the safety cars. He's going to get his lap back, and he's going to get right back to the back of the field. So that recovers all of the ground he lost with his pit stop, which wasn't too badly timed. There's the race out of the pits. We see there. I think that was actually Bo Albert coming out in the Astro Gaming Altus Esports machine. And judging by the pit stop time, they're on the same tyres as they had at the start of the race, just 32 seconds stationary. 32 for Harlow as well, so looks like double stinting. Certainly the order of the day for all the front runners.
I'm surprised that Cooper Murray and Dennis Gaterick have not chosen to come into the pits as soon as the safety car was deployed, because they're now going to get trapped on the circuit behind the safety car. They're going to be just about out of fuel. Probably have, another 3 or 4 laps at the absolute maximum. And when they do have to come in for their first pit stop, they're going to lose a tremendous amount of track position. So I'm a little bit surprised by that decision to stay out on the racetrack and not take advantage of this safety car to come down pit lane.
Cooper Murray's just been told to back off the safety car a little bit for, I guess, a bit of a wariness as to an accidental collision. Normally the safety car in racing is ghosting and you can drive straight through it, but this is a manual safety car being driven by Simon Black. You can't hit it. If you do, you're going to get yourself some damage. Now, there's 2 memes in Australian sim racing that are eternally going to live on. One of them is Brenton Hobson and 6th place. The other one is Bo Albert and turn 2 at Bathurst. So I can confirm Albert has made it past turn 2. He's been given a reprieve for the fact he's doing it under safety car conditions, but I would watch that man very closely when we go back green, because he has a strange affinity to crash out at Griffin's Bend when he comes racing at Bathurst.
So, interestingly enough, Bo Albert's one of the drivers who has... Well, that's one of the teams that's done a driver change. Some of the other teams, including Jackson Suzel and Harlow, Ethan Griggols and James Scott, they've all stayed aboard their respective cars for an extra stint. And as we see some more pit stops taking place under this safety car, including Cooper Murray, who now comes in, but a lap too late, you would have to say, for Cooper Murray in car number 36. They've timed that pit stop a bit wrong.
Yep.
They didn't react to the safety car when it was initially deployed, and that's going to cost that team quite severely in terms of track position. Cooper Murray, of course, sharing with Cody Murcher and Brody Kostecki, so they're going to dump an enormous amount of track position.
Curiously, Dennis Gaterick committing to the bet he's made, and he's staying in the car on the older tyres with low fuel, and this should make for an interesting restart with those race leaders tucked up behind him.
And the number 21 car's back in as well, so John Peasnick came in when the safety car was first deployed. He's gone out onto the track, he's done a single lap, and he's now back in. One lap later, so I'm not quite sure what the story is with that car either.
Can you grab the pit stop time of his previous one? Did he do everything he meant to? Looks like he's up on the jacks getting a few tyres changed.
So it adds...
Oh, sorry, that was the car in front of him, never mind.
Yeah, just having a look, depending on how many tyres you change, it adds about 30 seconds to a pit stop to change tyres.
And that was 42 seconds, 43 seconds, so it's certainly on Tunnel 4. Very interesting indeed there for R1 Sim Sports. And already, not even an hour through this race, and we're seeing some very fast cars getting cycled to the back of the field. Cooper Murray in last minute racing John Peasnick, R1 Sim Sports, are going to have their work cut out on this restart as we trail around behind the safety car.
So Cooper Murray has fallen all the way back to 21st position. John Peasnick's now down to 29th. And Dennis Gattery continues to lead the race, still hasn't come in for a pit stop, so that's another car that's going to drop positions when he takes his stop as well.
There's a couple of lapped cars restarting inside of the top 10 in terms of track position. There's a lapped car behind Dennis Gatterick, which gives him a bit of breathing room over Jackson Harlow, first car who has pitted. This could be a very, very awkward restart for a few of these drivers.
Could be, and the problem with someone like Cooper Murray, Ryan, is that when you get buried in the midfield, as he now is, you're right in the danger zone. So particularly when you've got the field compression that we've now got because of the safety car, if there are incidents in the mid-pack, it leaves you very vulnerable to getting caught up in somebody else's drama. So that's the risk of staying out and pitting a lap later and dropping track position, as it leaves you very, very exposed to getting caught up in a crash and potentially sustaining damage. We are going to get a restart this time around, and it'll be Dennis Gatterick, our race leader, who will lead the field back around to the start-finish line.
Restart number 2 of the 12-hour. It looks like Tim Bollinger's driving to the pits to get out of the way of the race leaders. And suddenly the reprieve is gone for the 99 car. He's got the fastest cars in the race lining up behind him as we go back green at Mount Panorama. And it is a great restart for Jackson Harlow. He's stuck right to the back of the TM racing machine and shadows him in towards turn 1 and gets up the inside as Gatterick runs wide. And now Ethan Grigault is going to look to get by as well, up Mountain Straight. Gatterick already on the back foot. He's boxed in right now behind Jackson Harlow and alongside Grigault. Very tough spot for him as we head towards Griffin's Bend. On board with James Scott, this is his view as the top 3 sort themselves out, and Scott now up behind the TM racing car looking for a way through. You might have to wait a little while.
Gatterick's got every right to be there, because keep in mind this is a genuine battle for track position. Just because Gatterick's out of pit stop sequence doesn't mean that he's not allowed to fight for position, but it will be a bit of a frustration for the likes of James Scott and also for Bo Albert, who are now tucked up behind that yellow Ferrari.
He got through turn 2. Mistake for Grigault coming out of the cutting. Really checked up this pack. Dropped time to Harlow and has put them all very, very much nose to tail as through Skyline the rest of the field comes. P45, Michael Angus has got everyone raring to get by him. Ross Rizzo currently 6th in the race. Can't get by as we head down the mountain. Look at that train of cars. Angus is going to get swamped. Conrod straight here.
Yeah, you can see the massive freight train of cars pulling out to try and make their way past that back marker Ferrari. And he just needs to be aware of what the situation is and make sure that the race leading cars are able to get through with the minimum of fuss. And you can see that he just backed off there at the couple of cars.
Whoa, big incident! Jordan Ross has lost control and has taken out Glenn Postlethwaite and Thomas Hinds as well. He got loose, the rear end overstepped. Jordan Ross couldn't control it, and that has taken out Hinds and Postlethwaite in a big, big way. And Hinds can't get to the pits. Yes, he can. He was in an awkward spot. Look at this replay. This is absolutely massive.
It was as they were trying to make their way past that back marker there, they were just slightly wide of the ideal approach. Bang! The two BMWs collide. Oh, you have to feel for Thomas Hinds. He was the completely innocent victim in that one, minding his own business, and he's been centre punched as he turned into the left-hander at the chase. Unbelievably bad luck for poor Thomas Hinds, who has been wiped out through no fault of his own.
That is a big, big crash. 3 cars, and 3 of them so competitive into the pits, and a spare car taken for all 3. 2 Synergy Sim Racing machines collide, going side by side through the kink. A prime example of why that is never a good idea. And there's going to be some heads rolling at Synergy, I suspect, after that incident. And some eyes rolling at Duva Racing, I suspect, after being the victims to that. But we stay green.
A couple of other cars that were very lucky not to get caught up in that one as well, Ryan. That could have actually been a worse incident.
Yeah, it could have been. They were actually quite fortunate. Not often you get away with a big crash like that when the field's compressed. So out front, Harlow's advantage is a second from Grigalt. Dennis Gaderick is holding station pretty nicely ahead of James Scott. A poor run out of Mountain Straight cost him 2 spots straight up on the opening restart lap. But he's recovered well at the moment, but we should see him in the not-too-distant future. And James Scott has dropped his teammate in Bo Albert quite comfortably at the moment in terms of the gap between 4th and 5th there. Here's Reese Keane and Kane Houston fighting for 18th place. Reese Keane on the inside. Sorry, on the outside, getting passed by Houston, and a little bit of contact there as Keane jinked to the left as Cooper Murray tried to pick his way through. Remember, Murray got caught out, didn't react quick enough to the safety car, had to pit on the 2nd lap and restarted a long way down the order as a result. He's recovering now, but he's only 18th. And John Piesnik is 23rd, just a couple cars behind him on the racetrack. Looking for a move on Martin Crisp and not quite able to execute.
So 1 hour complete here in the Bathurst 12 hour. It's been an action-packed hour as well, hasn't it, Ryan? Hard to believe that it's only been 1 hour. There's been so much going on within this hour. Still got a couple of hours left to go in the SimSpeed TV broadcast, and then we'll be resuming coverage at about 5 p.m. this afternoon to bring you the final 3 hours of this race.
And that'll be you and Reese at the mantle there. They have sleep and other business to attend to in that time. Director J says, what is sleep? He has done just a little bit of preparation for this broadcast, which just gets him awake in the wee hours of the evening and the morning. In fact, when I woke up this morning and yawned a good morning, he said he'd been awake for a couple hours already, as that was a car off the road at the chase, and this looks a little bit messy, potentially, in towards Murray's corner. That's Dennis Gaderick losing out to James Scott, who finally makes the move, but he's lost a little bit of ground, a little bit more than he would have wanted to the race leaders. Good lap there from Grigalt. It was only 2 minutes ago I said the gap was a second. It's now 0.3 of a second. And Harlow, for the first time in this race, maybe not the fastest car out at the front, half a dozen.
So, just some updates as far as the Evolution Racing team strategy goes. So, the car number 26, Ethan Grigalt, no tyres, no driver change. They stayed on board for a double stint, but they're splitting their strategies at the Evolution Racing team because the number 13 car, which now has Ian Ford on board, took tyres and also did a driver change. So, a bit of an each-way bet happening there at the Evolution Racing team. That is the advantage, isn't it, of running a multi-car team, is if you do get a safety car at a particular stage, you can split up your strategies and hope that one of the strategy options that you go for will work out in your favour a bit later on in the day. Other interesting point that I've just been reminded of is the fact that the maximum continuous driving time is 65 laps, so no driver is allowed to do more than 65 continuous laps behind the wheel of a race car. So those drivers who are on board for a double stint, they'll definitely have to get out at the next stop, or they will be in danger of exceeding that 65 laps maximum continuous stint length.
Wayne Burke has been served a black flag. but he's not in the car. Ah, yes, that'll be the Synergy Sim Racing machine that caused the melee down at the chase when Postlethwaite was at the wheel. So that'll have to serve a drive-through, which I don't think there'll be too many complaints over that one.
No, to be honest, that's the least of their worries at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, this is the car. Interesting. So Postlethwaite might not have been the catalyst to that incident, because this is a car being shared with Jordan Ross and Tom Freer and Wayne Burke. Into the pits they come for their drive-through. Did you see those telltale tyre marks there in the gravel? Whoa, hello.
Oh! Bruce Kiley hard into the wall at Red Park, and this, I think, will probably trigger another safety car intervention because, yeah, the car's actually lodged in the concrete wall there. So, yep, Simon Black's going to return to the racetrack for what will be our third safety car intervention of the race. Goodness gracious me, that's a heavy hit into the wall. Let's have a look at how it happened.
You often hear of cars getting buried in the tyre bundle, but I've never seen a car get buried in the concrete.
So he just come out of the pits.
That's synergy.
Bruce Kiley driving. So he's the co-driver for Todd Parks and Glenn Postlethwaite. So he's just got into the car to replace Glenn Postlethwaite. So this is a car that very recently had, or was involved in that big incident down at the Chase.
It's been a rough few minutes for Synergy Sim Racing. Two of the three cars in the same crash. One of them a black flag, and the other one has another crash.
So, on cold tyres, dialing himself into the car because he's turning his first laps of the race. Down into Red Park, and it must go wrong for him.
Out of shot.
Oh, I wonder if that's some sort of hardware failure or something, because the car's just gone straight ahead at that part of the racetrack. That's a weird one.
Oh, yes, indeed. That is a hardware failure. Or a mechanical failure of some description. Wait! Who was that coming through? Thank goodness they weren't a little bit wider, because there's no way they could have reacted to that incident. Now watch the wheel here. Maybe not. Maybe he just had some oversteer and just overcorrected. Because the wheel didn't do anything untoward. You could see him putting the inputs into the right and then back to the left. Just looked like a horrible overcorrection on his part.
This safety car's come at a very, very good time for Dennis Gaverick, who is into the pits for his first pit stop, handing the car over to Glenn Riddell. A few other drivers going to take the opportunity to come down pit road and top up with fuel while we're under this caution period.
How about Jordan Ross? He was serving a penalty as the safety car was called. And now he's back into the lane to do a service. At least there's some good fortune going the way of Synergy Sim Racing, if not much. One of their cars is still going alright. It's in P8 right now at the hands of Scott Nolan. Despite tumbling a little bit early on, he's recovered. He's still sitting in 8th. In fact, he's back where he started. So, a good recovery after a poor opening stanza. And just confirming as well, going back to that incident, I called it out as Postlethwaite's error and mistake, but it actually seems as if it was Jordan Ross that made the error and clean bowled his teammate and Thomas Hinds as well. That's why Jordan Ross was given the drive-through there. And I wonder if he's jumping out of the car now that machine is back in the lane.
So this will move Jackson Harlow, or Jackson Suzel and Harlow back to the lead of the motor race ahead of Ethan Grigols and James Scott. They've been pretty much the top three right since the get-go.
Sorry, Lockie. We just had a bit of a nose-to-tail incident into the forest elbow involving Daniel Yeaman. See if we can have a replay here, Jay, director. Yeah, and Yeaman's picked up significant damage to the right front. A car that's picked up 20 spots for that incident under green flag conditions. Watch this. Just coming through the right-hander, approaching Forest Elbow.
So Ross Rizzo's the car just ahead of him on the racetrack. Oh, yeah, okay, that might be damage to Ross Rizzo's car as well, potentially. Oh, sorry, no, that's not Ross Rizzo. That's one of the back markers, my apologies. But
Dion Peters, Team Hyperdrive 219, but you're right, he does have damage to the back of the car. Yates got damage to the front, and Scott Nolan, you could see he has been very lucky. No, he was collected as well. So he missed the car in front, but he got cleaned up by Ian Ford behind. So four with damage in that incident. What triggered it? Just... pace was maintained by Harlow, it seems. Everyone else behind just got a bit too antsy.
Just drivers losing concentration, I think. And that's a shame for Daniel Yeaman, because like you said, he'd made some 20 positions since the start of this race, worked his way all the way up into 6th position with a combination of rapid lap times and opting not to take tyres at the...
and good passing, yeah.
Yep.
So Ian Ford's car looks alright. No visible damage to him. Maybe a slight bit on the right front, but nothing that should affect him. Scott Nolan's rear end looks in pretty decent condition, so he's gotten lucky there. But
so if you're Daniel Yeaman, do you come in now under this safety car and get the car fixed, or do you just try and persevere with it for the rest of the stint?
He might get away with it. I mean, if you look at his right front, you can see the fenders pushed in, the bumpers pushed up, the bonnet's crumpled a little bit.
Crinkled or crumpled, yep.
Yeah, I got stuck between those two words. He might be fine. There are, I mean, for example, Scott Nolan's got slightly less severe, but same area damage to his car, which came during the actual racing aspect of this race, and he's fine. But Daniel Yeaman, who knows? We'll find out when we go back green. For Dion Peters, it's a big shame because already a tough race for him, and Team Hyperdrive back there in 47th is now only going to get harder with the lack of a boot on that car. What is the rear wing actually attached to at the moment? Just the inside. It sort of hooks into where the boot would be and goes off to either side. Lucky not to lose the wing.
We were talking before, Ryan, about the fact that you can't do more than 65 laps continuously during the stint, and we've talked about the fact that there's minimum and maximum percentages to be completed by each driver over the course of the race. One of the other rules, and this is something that might become a factor a bit later on in the day, is that after you complete a stint, you must serve a minimum 25-lap rest period before you're allowed to get back into the car. And that's similar to what's in place for the Rail Bathurst 12-hour as well, where a driver must spend a compulsory amount of time out of the car once they've completed a stint. You actually have to be a bit careful with that because if, for example, you're a 3-driver team and each driver did, say, an 8-lap stint, you could actually end up in a position where nobody's allowed to drive the car. Not that you would do that, of course, because it would be a pretty dumb strategy, but it is something that the teams have to be careful of.
It's something Jay would do. And for once, that's not me insulting Jay. That was self-proclaimed there behind the scenes. But yeah, you're right. It is something to be aware of. And it's why we'll see double stints on the likes of Jackson Harlow right now. Whereas we might see double stint from Bo instead because he's jumped in place of Cooper Webster. Going back green then. Harlow's in control for our third restart of the day. 1 hour and 13 minutes into the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12-hour, and we are back green as the sun shines over Mount Panorama. Dion Peters just steps aside, or tries to, for Daniel Yeaman. I'm watching Yeaman's car with keen interest here. He doesn't seem to be languishing, does it, down the straight, so he might have gotten away with it. But it's certainly damage he would have preferred not to have, especially having come under the safety car condition. And just behind Will Orton here is Cooper Murray. The safety car doing wonders for the last minute racing, allowing them to claw back more time that was lost under the previous safety car intervention.
Certainly has, and Cooper Murray's done a good job of making up a lot of the spots that he lost, but he's still outside the top 10, so we've still got a bit of work to do to get the car back up into the position that it was in before that suboptimal strategy decision. Remember, he was running in 4th position before not coming in during the first lap of one of the safety car interventions, and that's why the car got bundled down the order.
Remember last restart when Michael Angus had a whole train of cars behind him? Well, guess what he's got this time? A whole train of cars behind him. This time it's led by Dave Clements, Andrew Dyson, and the rest of the field all stacked up looking for a way by. Further up the order is what we are seeing on screen as Scott Nolan loses out to Ian Ford, going by him, and Rob Carmichael places his Ferrari in the gap as well. Nolan almost came across at him, but saw him right at the last second, and a lunge from Joshua Burden trying to get by Maverick Benson. Gets it a little bit wrong coming out of the chase, checks up Orton, and allows Murray a look at the inside for Murray's corner. And that is Murray's corner indeed. He gets it done and puts the car up into 12th.
Very good run.
I'm learning, Lockie. I hate myself for it, but I did it.
It was coming at some stage during the race. We've got 6 hours of broadcast time to get plenty of corny puns into the coverage, no doubt about that. Here's Luke Rosella, another driver on a recovery mission after an early race spin sent him to near the back of the pack. He's worked his way back up into 15th position. A couple of other changes happening. Here's John Peasnick, who we saw struggling for a bit of pace in the early stint. He stayed on board for a double stint in car number 17, and he's climbed another position as well, up to 16th position, just in behind Luke Rosella.
Oh, we've got a black flag that's been issued. This one's gone to Dylan Gray for contact with Glenn Postlethwaite on lap 35. Don't believe we saw that. And it's Paul Nichols currently at the wheel of that car.
So I think that, yeah, so when that car had contact with Postlethwaite, I think it was a lap down, so that's probably why the officials have stepped in, because cars that are a lap down making contact with cars that are on the late lap is something that's generally viewed pretty dimly by race control.
Been a rough race for that car. Currently 2 laps down, 49th, and we've seen it in amongst the action with the leaders from a lap down perspective a number of times already, as Will Orton switches one way then the other into the kink on the back of Maverick Benson, who just places the car a car's width further to the left in defense of the attacking BMW there. Cooper Murray's navigated both of them, and he's looking to navigate Joshua Burden at the final corner. He gets it done. It was probably a little bit late, but Burden was willing and almost hooked his right rear quarter panel. That got a little bit dicey. He had to lift off. He flashes the headlights in distaste. He suspects it was Murray moving across on him. Either way, they escape. Murray's up another spot, up inside the top 10. Again.
Cooper Murray's driving angry at the moment, isn't he? Obviously frustrated by losing all of those positions during the pit stop phase earlier on. You can see that he's pretty fired up and not interested in sticking around behind cars any longer than he absolutely has to. He sent it from a fair way back on Josh Burden there at Murray's corner once again, and Burden only just saw him coming at the last minute and opened up the steering to make sure that those cars were able to get through without any contact, and it's going to be Scott Nolan who will be Cooper Murray's next target. Nolan defensive at the top of the hill there at Raid Park. Look at this big freight train of cars forming up.
I don't like this.
And this has got carnage written all over it. Scott Nolan with a fired up Cooper Murray breathing down his neck. And look at the huge gaggle of cars that have formed up behind Scott Nolan in the Synergy Sim Racing car as they plunge down the hill. He's going to be under... Yeah.
You know those moments where you think something's going to kick off here? This is one of those moments. Because Scott Nolan's not looking comfortable. And he has got so many cars stacked up behind him. Cooper Murray, thankfully for, I think, the longevity of all the cars involved, is going to pass him in a straight line. But there's more moves happening behind as well, as Will Orton looks to get by Maverick Benson. We've seen Orton be reasonably aggressive at times in this race as well. As Murray has very easily made that move, but there's a look from Joshua Burton trying to sneak up by Nolan as well. Clements, Benson, Rosella, Peasnick are all side by side coming out of the chase. And they're on a big glob of cars into Murray's corner. Yeah, Peasnick gets by Benson, who's suddenly losing time, hand over fist, and places to go with it. Andrew Dyson looking to get by him as well. Just backs off it. Dyson's a very experienced runner. He will show the conservative nature he needs to in this situation, but he's going to be in an awkward spot on the outside of turn 2, Reese, with his teammate Reese Keane looking to get by him as well, although that might help him, the fact they're teammates. They all back out of it and tuck in line, except for those two. Rosella getting by Clements, who ends up high and wide.
I think that the Dyson car was one of the cars that took tyres during its pit stop, because it was running inside the top 10, but dropped some spots during the pit stop. But if Andrew Dyson's got fresher tyres compared to his rivals, then that could be a bit of an advantage throughout this stint, and it also will potentially mean a shorter pit stop for that car at the next round of pit stops if they double stint this set of tyres.
What a group that was. Somehow they've somewhat sorted themselves out over the course of that lap.
So Daniel Yeaman continuing to press on even despite that damage to the front of his car. He has dropped one spot though. Ian Ford managing to get past him on the previous lap. But keep in mind that Ian Ford was another driver who took tyres during his first pit stop. So that car's got fresher tyres on board as well. And a good showing so far from the Evolution Racing team. They've got two cars running inside the top 6 that are running on alternate strategies.
Dion Peters has got a real lick of speed in that hyperdrive car. It's a real shame they're back in 46 and with the damage they've got, because it actually looks a pretty decent machine. He's hanging tough with those drivers he restarted amongst in the top 10 as Scott Nolan on the outside has to sidestep as John Pearson gets by. Dave Clements capitalizes, and now Maverick Benson considers what he can do. He decides that what he cannot do is go 3 wide.
Scott Nolan's been gobbled up in this stint, hasn't he?
He looked like he'd recovered in that phase for a minute, didn't he? And he was back up to where he started, but this is looking very reminiscent of the initial stint where he just drops time and places. Something not quite settling right with that Synergy Sim Racing car. And it's still the best Synergy car out there by a mile, with the Jarman's the other two have had.
That's true. It's pretty much the sole surviving hope for Synergy Sim Racing at this stage, with the other two cars coming together with the chase earlier on. Cooper Murray is absolutely flying at the moment. He was 3 seconds behind Rob Carmichael only a couple of laps ago, and he's already caught up to the back of Rob Carmichael. So Cooper Murray continuing the explosive pace that we've seen from that car so far. 2 minutes 2.5 was the time for Cooper Murray last time around. He's basically the 3rd fastest driver on the racetrack at the moment.
If you look up at P2, you will find a very hungry and aggressive James Scott looking to get by Ethan Grigaud, as there is the move for Cooper Murray on Rob Carmichael, who let him go. He lifted off on Conrad, and Murray picks up a spot. There is the P2 battle.
We're hearing Scott Nolan a few laps ago had contact with the wall at Forest Elbow as well, so some steering damage possibly for that car, which would explain why he's tumbling back down the results.
Are we on board with Scott Nolan now? Yes, we are. And you can see in that big rear view camera or mirror or screen or whatever you want to call it, the looming headlights of a Ferrari. Eventually those headlights will turn off as we get further into the day, but right now it serves to really highlight that there is a car behind him, and then a car driven by Andrew Dyson.
Dyson should get a fairly easy move here at Griffin's Bend, which he does. Scott Nolan doesn't do a whole lot to argue over that position.
Jason Bentz mirroring that move on Reese Keane, just in behind him. Bentz, we saw in the fight for a top 15 berth all through qualifying yesterday. He just couldn't find the last couple of hundredths of a second he needed to get the car and drag the XCM machine into the top 15 shootout. And as a result, he started this one a little bit further down the order than he wanted. Currently 19th.
Got a spinner coming out of the cutting. That's Tommy Chun. He was one of the stars of the Circuit XL 8 series that we had during lockdown last year. You don't want to be spinning out at the cutting and look at. Imagine trying to turn a car around there. He's actually trying to use one of the escape roads as a bit of a turning bay, but it's a completely blind approach there. So trying to turn a car around without ending up parked in the oncoming traffic is an incredible challenge, and he's done a great job there, Tommy Chun, to get the car moving again without colliding with any of the other traffic.
Yeah, a good slide coming out of Griffin's Bend there, didn't he? Had it a little bit crossed up, and what did he do wrong at the cutting? Just over rotated the rear end, and around it went. He did a good job using that escape road. He didn't drive onto the racing line at all, and allowed himself to get back going without any further issues. Here's a replay from on board with Michael Angus. I wonder if he found Tommy Chun. No, he didn't. So he's had his own issue further up the order. We've seen Angus restarting in very awkward spots for himself the last couple of restarts. Nothing happened. Alrighty. There's Jason Bentz again on the inside of Reese Keane. I thought for a moment that we were going to see a change between these two cars. James Scott certainly looks the quickest. They're 2.3 seconds off of the race leader, Harlow, who's pretty much led this from start to where we are now, with the exception of a few laps in the middle. But I don't necessarily think it's the fastest car out there right now. Cooper Webster certainly could be faster when he's on track. And James Scott probably has a little bit more time up his sleeve if he can just get by this Evolution Racing Team car. He's flashing the headlights, letting him know he's there. I don't think Galt cares much.
Then high quality driving from all of our leading contenders so far. Shortly they'll have to hand the cars over to their co-drivers, of course. They're only allowed to spend, the drivers who started the race, another 23 laps on board before they get to that 65 lap maximum.
Whoop.
The car off the road at the chase, Jason Bentz, so that was the car that was involved in that battle just on the fringe of the top 15.
You could see the tyre marks on the inside, couldn't you, Lachlan? Where he slid.
So he's coming up behind Scott Nolan here into the chase. Ryan, they were side by side through the kink, and he's just clipped the curb on the inside, Jason Bentz. And oh, wow, how lucky was they not to get collected by the train of cars that were coming up behind into the chase. That was very, very fortunate there that no other cars were involved in that incident.
and I'm going to interject and request another replay of Michael Brennan at the last corner. That should have been a replay of what Postlethwaite and Ross did to Hinds, but crisp, so fortunate. Brennan at the last corner spun out after getting by Jason Bentz here, and then proceeded to do what I would call a dumb move with his rejoin. It's the fence, and how do you rejoin? Not like that.
It was a Simona de Silvestro style spin at the last corner if you cast your mind back to the Bathurst 1000 in 2017. And then it was a Sebastian Vettel into Lance Stroll style rejoin.
On board with Houston. Another unlucky Team Hyperdrive entry today. I would say that's a black flag coming the way of Michael Brennan.
Yeah, for a dangerous re-entry to the circuit.
You spin out, you hit the fence, you've damaged it. It's an incident at the entry of the Dipper. Daniel Hall, engine smoking, car stranded in one of the most awkward spots on the circuit. I think we've said that about every spot on the circuit. He's found a gap where he could do a three-point turn and get himself going again. There's no cars coming. Deathly silent at this part of the circuit right now. Oh, I hear a car.
Oh, yeah. They need to get the yellow flags out just to make sure that everybody realises that he's parked there. Oh.
It needs a safe car, I think.
Race control will give him as much time as they can to allow him to get that car moving. Here we go. There's a gap here. Oh, can he...
Please don't reverse on the racing line and then stall it. Go, go, go! Yay! Good job, Daniel. Oh, now please don't pop that engine on the way back, otherwise it might all be for nothing.
That car's going nowhere else but the pits at the moment. So here we go. This is what triggered that incident, coming down into the S's. I have a feeling I know what's happened here because there's a couple of classic accidents that you can have heading over the skyline. Yep, car breaks away, gets loose, bang, into the fence on the left.
We saw Chad Vigor make that mistake twice in qualifying yesterday. So easy to do. Daniel Hall's illustrated it again in the race here. You just have to get your line slightly wrong and you're gone.
The tricky thing over the skyline is that the road drops away, but you're trying to brake to get the speed washed off the car heading down the hill as well. So the combination of being on the brakes, having the car getting light over the crest, and having a bit of steering angle on as well creates a recipe for a very unsettled and very twitchy car. And you're right, you're only going to get it slightly wrong through there and you're going to be into the fence. But he's made it back to the pits and we avoid needing to have a safety car intervention, which I think the teams will be quite relieved, because if we had had a safety car at that point, it would have come about halfway through the stint that we're in at the moment. So it would have been a bit out of sequence for everybody, and it would have been quite tricky for the teams to decide what to do in terms of strategy, whether or not to take a pit stop at that point of the race.
Michael Brennan's number 333, currently being piloted by Max Havett, has been given a black flag. So they will have to come back into the lane and serve a drive-through for the dangerous re-entry. That was a wild couple of minutes there on the mountain. 3 incidents in 3 different parts of the circuit. Things happen in threes, it would seem, as we go on board with John Piesnik here behind Luke Rosella. Piesnik's recovery has not been quite as fast and prevalent as Cooper Murray's, but it is just as effective almost. And Luke Rosella, quite the recovery he's had as well from facing the wrong way.
So thinking about strategy and how the rest of the race is going to play out, if you're a team who has started your fastest driver and left them in the car for a double stint for the start of the race, do you now get them out of the car and save them up again for the end, and
Yep.
have the other drivers do the middle stages. That's how I would be approaching it, I think. Get them out of the car, send them away from their computer, make them have a break, go outside, do a walk, get some exercise, get some fresh air, have a nap, do whatever else you need to do to make sure that you're nice and fresh and ready to concentrate at 100% when you get back into the car later on.
Yeah, I think that's the strategy you want to go for. A lot of these teams towards the front are fortunate enough that all 3 or all 4 of their drivers could, on their given day, be the fastest driver, so they are afforded a bit of luxury in that regard, as John Peasnick got the defensive manoeuvres out of the way there, as Luke Rosella wanted to get back by him.
Actually not been a bad recovery from John Peasnick. We were talking about how he was just struggling for a bit of pace in the first stint and then got shuffled way down the order with the pit strategy at the first round of pit stops, but he's done a good job to find his way to be just outside the top 10. You know, the other drivers in that car are all very accomplished GT drivers, so he's got that car right back into the game.
Rob Carmichael has got a little group that's formed in behind him. He's
So
just
he managed to get past, Daniel Yeaman. So Yeaman, I reckon that car maybe not quite 100%. It's not massively slow, but definitely damage to the front of it, and he has dropped some spots since the race start, Daniel Yeaman. He was in 6th position when the race went green after the last safety car, so he has slipped back 3 spots since then. Hearing as well that the number 40 car, Bruce Kiley, at the wheel of that one, has retired from the race. So that's the first car that is officially out of the Bathurst 12 hour after 31 laps.
big shame. 2 fast repairs, but they are gone. With just an hour and a half on the board. This is an interesting group here from Rob Carmichael on down. Yeaman's sticking with him. He was for a minute. Will Orton's got some pace, but John Peasnick's got more, and Luke Rosella's looking pretty racy as well. Here comes a move for Orton on the inside of Yeaman. Turn 2, it works, and Yeaman gets rear-ended by John Peasnick, who just overcooked it on the entry.
Luke Rosella now pulls up alongside John Peasnick on the run up into the cutting, side by side the 2 cars, and wow, Luke Rosella got squeezed right out to the wall on the outside. That was almost a bit of a Brody Kostecki and Jamie Whincup style incident there. Fortunately, Rosella decided that discretion was the better part of valour and managed to get the car slowed down just enough to avoid whacking the wall on the outside.
Crash at McPhillamy Park. Over the radio says Dave Clements as Daniel Yeaman, Yeaman goes straight ahead. Rather, Orton goes straight ahead down Skyline and through the S's. There's a McPhillamy shunt, Braden Mackay. I would class that more as Reed or Solomon Park than anything, but close enough. Considering Dave Clements is probably in a car right now, driving along. And Mackay is now driving along as well. So he gets the thing moving.
So here's what happened to Braden Mackay. Did he get a helping hand there? I think he did, didn't he? Yeah, and that's our race leader. So Jackson Suzel and Harlow was coming around to put a lap on Braden Mackay, and he's made contact with him.
Well,
Here
that
it is on board.
explains... Sorry, Lockie, that explains the apologies I was also hearing over the radio from Jackson Harlow on board.
Well. if you're in race control, how do you adjudicate on that incident? Because at the end of the day, it is up to the race leader to safely negotiate their way around back markers, and you would have to say that Jackson, Suzel and Harlow's failed to do that there. So I wonder if race control will be handing down a penalty to our race leading car.
It's tough on that, because you can certainly see why Harlow thought he was being let through. The lapped car just hung a little bit wide, and it looked like he was going to let him go by, but very suddenly just swung back into the racing line, and Harlow was left with nowhere to go. It will be interesting. Race control will adjudicate on it, and I am very interested to see what their adjudication will be, as we see Braden Nash fire out of the lane. Driving with Matthew Bowler and Will Orton this weekend. So Will Orton's hopped out, Nash has hopped in, and they're back to 32nd with that pit stop.
Bit of other news as well. Remember how a bit earlier on John Peasnick came in for a second pit stop? You were questioning why. It was because he sped in pit lane during his first pit stop. So the second pit stop for that car was a penalty for the pit lane speeding infringement, as we have a really good battle here. This is heating up between Ian Ford, Ross Rizzo and Cooper Murray. The contest for positions 5, 6 and 7, and once again Cooper is going to own Murray's corner as he slices down the inside of Ross Rizzo. That's the pass for position 6.
Good move. And defining moments in this race, is that one of them for the race leader? Navigating lap traffic, Jason Bentz, he's had his dramas recently, looking to get by Scott Nolan, and he's very close to that back bumper, isn't he? Through Murray's corner.
Yeah, we'll leave that one up to race control. It obviously hasn't damaged Jackson, Suzel and Harlow's car, though.
Black flags.
And he's been black flagged. Okay, so there we go. I was just about to say it's not damaged Jackson, Suzel and Harlow's car because he's still got very good pace. David Clements has had a spin at Hell Corner at turn number 1, but there we go. A defining moment in the race. Our race leader, Jackson, Suzel and Harlow, who has led this race from the outset, except for the pit stop shuffle, is now going to cop a penalty that's going to see him drop back down the order. So he just needed to exercise a bit more patience there, didn't he, Jackson, Suzel and Harlow? He went for a move on that Lamborghini in a section of the circuit where you don't normally see overtaking manoeuvres made. And JSH's impatience is going to cost him. He's going to have to take a tour through pit lane. And I have to say, I think that is a fair call from the officials.
Yeah. It's tough. I don't want a black flag for the race leader there, but I can see why, and I understand why, and I do, I guess, agree with it. It's deep down, and it sets a good precedent. You can't just blaze through the lapped cars. But that is a race-changing moment. Fortunately, it comes now rather than later, but it elevates Ethan Grigol and James Scott to the lead of the race.
You'd have to say that it's better to get a penalty like that now, when we've been under green flag conditions for quite some time and the field's a bit more spread out, than if it had come just after a safety car intervention, because he's only fallen back to 6th, Jackson, Suzel and Harlow. So it's certainly not a race-killing penalty. And because we're still in the very early stages of the race, not even a 1/6 of the way through this race yet, there's going to be plenty of time for JSH and the rest of the team to recover from that penalty. So it's certainly not game over yet, not by any stretch of the imagination. A few replays coming up here. We're riding on board with Thomas Hinds, who was following the Lamborghini through on another car at the chase. So Dave Clements, he's had a couple of incidents, hasn't he? Because we just saw that he was off the road at the chase, but we saw that he had another incident at Hell Corner as well. So let's check out the incident at the chase to start off with. Down the inside of James Chastenerf, and just locks the rear brakes, and Chastenerf has to take some avoiding action there to make sure that he doesn't T-bone that Ferrari.
on board with Daniel Yeaman. He is up behind Joshua Burden at this time. We've seen so much from him in this race. Yeaman.
Yep, so he's lost another couple of spots since we last checked in with him.
Let's check back in with our race leaders. Oh, there they are. Grigault and Scott. So Grigault now leads Evolution Racing Team. Scott's been looking like he could make a move for a very long time now, but he's just sitting in behind and waiting. I wonder if that Altus Esports car is just saving a little bit of fuel at the moment and coasting a little bit down Mountain and Conrod Straight. They've got a big gap in hand over Bo Albert and third in the sister Altus entry, 8 seconds away. Albert's a very good driver, but he's not quite on the level in the GT machinery as the top two cars, or at least Grigault and James Scott. Not at this portion of the race anyway, because of course he restarted right behind James Scott, but 8 seconds away from him now.
Bo Albert's job, though, really is not necessarily to try and run right up with the leaders, but it's to keep out of trouble, stay on the leader lap, bring the car home in one piece, because he obviously does have a couple of very fast and accomplished co-drivers with Sam Blackrock and also Cooper Webster, who we expect to be in the car for the final stint a bit later on in the day. Tell you what, though, the battle between our race leaders, Ethan Grigault and James Scott, I don't reckon those cars have been separated by more than a second for this entire race. They've been nose to tail, these two, for pretty much the entire journey. We're an hour and 45 minutes into the race, and there they are, still separated by just half a second.
We've been talking... Sorry, Loggy, continue.
Yeah, really professional demonstration of driving from both of these competitors.
I jumped in half a second too early. We've been talking about John Piesnik and why he had that issue coming through the pit lane under that safety car through it a little while ago. He came through twice. The reason is he got a penalty for speeding in the lane. That's why that car made 2 trips through the lane, and that is why Piesnik is now having to recover. And he's doing a decent job of it, but those are the sorts of penalties that you really don't want to be getting in a race like this. You know you're going to have issues at some point or another. A speeding penalty in an endurance race is not one you probably should be getting. There's no reason to be too aggressive into the pit lane.
Again, though, if you are going to get a penalty like that, better for it to happen early in the race. Number one, it gives you more time to recover from it, and number two, it also makes you aware that that's something that you can get penalised for, and make sure that you don't do it again.
So after the drive-through, Jackson Harlow's emerged in P5, and he's just behind Cooper Murray. This will be interesting because, as we see McNamara get by Sean, Murray and Harlow have been at very different spots in this race, but they both look very fast. Now we're going to get a good gauge to see who's the quickest between the two of them.
Yeah, and not only that, but between the two of them, they're also just starting to reel in third place Bo Albert as well. Both of them were quicker than Bo Albert last time through. Jackson Suzel and Harlow still the fastest driver on the racetrack as well. 2 minutes 2.3 for him last time around, so good consistent pace from Jackson Suzel and Harlow, but he is actually going to have to pass some cars now as he starts to recover from the time that he lost with that drive-through penalty. And here they are on screen. Cooper Murray in the blue BMW just ahead of the white United Sim Sports machine with Jackson Suzel and Harlow at the wheel. Laps traffic just ahead of them as well. And they're a bit over 2 seconds behind Bo Albert. There he is in the Altus Esports car that you can see just up the road on Conrod Straight. So I reckon that shortly this is going to become a three-way battle for third position in the race.
Should be good fun, and it will be intriguing to see how they handle it, with still a tick over 10 hours left to run in the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12-hour. And that third place battle is for the final spot on the podium, which will offer up the headsets, cash, and trophies. And then Logitech G and Astro Gaming as well. So, personally, I would love to see 3 non-Ultras cars on the podium. Now, the reason I say that, Lockie, is they are famously sponsored by Logitech G and Astro Gaming, and I know for a fact Bo Albert is using, right now, one of the headsets that are actually up for grabs on the podium. So, you see where I'm coming from there?
Yeah, it would be nice to see the prizes go to people who don't already have that equipment.
But there are no favours in this game. The quickest cars will emerge at the front, at the end, and if it is Altus Esports, then all power to them. They deserve what they've got.
So last time around, 2-minute 2.6 for Ethan Grigault, 2-minute 2.6 for James Scott, 2:03.5 for Bo Albert, a 2:3 for Murray, and a 2:3 for Suzel and Harlow. A 2:8 for Ian Ford, who continues to demonstrate pretty good pace as well. All of the other key runners are in the low to mid 2:03 bracket at the moment.
So you can see where Albert's losing out. He's about a second slower than the 2 cars out front. And he's over a second slower than the 2 behind. He's been buoyed a little bit by the stint Webster put in and where he got to restart, but his relative pace isn't fantastic. Because if you look back, you find Ian Ford is quicker, Ross Rizzo is quicker, John Peasnick is quicker, Rob Carmichael and Luke Rosella and Joshua Burden, Daniel Yeaman are all pretty much matching him for pace. So,
Luke Rosella getting the job done on Rob Carmichael at the chase there. Good move up the inside. Luke Rosella, good recovery drive for him. Fell all the way back to 45th position after the spin at Forest Elbow earlier on. The team have left him in the car. They've basically said, well, you made the mistake to bury us down the order, so you can dig us out of this mess as well. And he has, Luke Rosella. He's climbed his way up into 9th position. We're on lap number 54 of the 2021 Bathurst 12 hour. We're watching it here on SimSpeed TV. Ryan Jones, Lachlan Mansell in the commentary box talking you through all of the action. And the news is that less than half a second separates our 2 race leaders, Ethan Grigault and James Scott, who have both been on board their respective cars since the beginning of this race. And we've got a car off at the chase. And that's Dave Clements. He's had a few incidents, hasn't he, in the last 5 laps or so. 1 at Hell Corner and 2 at the chase. We'll pick it up on the Motor Simulation replay. And you know what? That's a carbon copy of the incident that he had there at the chase a few laps ago. Exactly the same sort of mistake.
That's pretty unfortunate. The point I was getting at a little while ago is Albert's pace isn't great relative to the top 10. If he isn't able to keep the car elevated, he is going to give a bit of a job to his co-drivers in this race. It's going to get a little bit dicey here because here comes Cooper Murray. He's caught up to the back of Albert and he's going to get by him down at the chase. I don't expect Bo to fight this too hard. Oh, watch out though, because Harlow almost vied in as well and almost vied in straight to the right rear quarter panel of the Astro Gaming Altus Esports number 83. Murray is through. Harlow will have to wait another couple of corners, and they were trying to dance around the lapped car of Tim Bollinger in all of that as well. That little run through a minute ago, Lockie, is that what you do when you come back from the ad breaks on TV? Did you slip into TV mode there?
Yeah, it was a little bit. So, Bo Albert then surrendering 3rd position. You're right, his pace hasn't been great. He's another driver who's probably got the worst of both worlds because he got into that car with an old set of tyres, so with double stinting for the tyres but single stinting for the driver, the tyres will be well past their best now, and I think Bo Albert will be very thankful to get into the pits and grab a fresh set of tyres at the next pit stop, which will be coming up fairly shortly because all of our key runners have now been on the track for about 27 or 28 laps, 28 and a half laps in fact for our race leaders, so probably only another 1 or 2 laps depending on fuel range before we start to see the second round of pit stops. And in the case of our race leaders, certainly all of our top 3 cars will be seeing driver changes because they're getting very, very close to that 65 lap maximum stint length. So they almost like starting a new race all over again with a heap of new drivers jumping on board some of these cars for what will be the next phase of the race.
Yeah, we'll see a couple stay in the car. I expect Bo to stay in the car. I expect we'll see Grigault, James Scott, Harlow jumping out. Ian Ford will probably stay in the car. Here's a replay of Luke Swan getting it wrong out of turn 1. Whoop. Hard mouth moment for those cars coming through on the next lot. Oh boy, that was a really awkward spot. Again,
This goes to show, doesn't it? You always have to have your wits about you in a race like this one because you can be minding your own business, but there can be other people making mistakes or having incidents, so you have to be ready to react and ready to take evasive action. Particularly at a track like Mount Panorama where you've got big undulations and blind corners. You come out of the cutting and Forest Elbow, you can sometimes just never know exactly what's going to confront you on the other side, so you have to be ready to react in a heartbeat to make sure that you don't get caught up in somebody else's drama.
Ashley Lear gets by Scott Nolan, back to 20th for Nolan. The number 88 just isn't firing the way you'd expect after being in amongst the top 15 shootout. Had to start from 15th after clipping the fence in the shootout, but should have been a higher placed car than that in terms of race pace. Keep a clean eye on this car as the race goes on and see if it can recover any of the lost ground. Nolan's been in the machine since the start. He'll be one of the drivers hopping out at the end of the stint. But let's go to a quick break here on SimSpeed here. Before we get to the pit stop phase, we'll step aside for a minute. You're watching the Bathurst 12-hour thanks to Smith & Sons, OSR, AMF, Logitech G, and Astro Gaming. Welcome back to the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12-hour. There's been some pit stops. There's been an incident as well. John Peasnick, his recovery drive halted somewhat, damaged the car, and time lost as he fired out of turn 1. He grabbed the grass on the right, looped it, straight into the concrete on the left. And the Ion Sim Sports machine now looking quite the bit worse for wear, and a long trudge back to the pits as well. With that happening just past pit exit. This is SimSpeed TV bringing you the coverage. 1 hour left of our opening coverage for the event. There is Bo Albert coming out of the lane. Looks like that car has taken tyres stationary for 68 seconds, or just over a minute. Oi, the other Altus car's off in the gravel and the grass. So is another man as well. I wonder if there was contact. As wow, big crash in front of James Scott, who had to take avoiding action because Ethan Gregot was in the fence, the race leader. And that would have been with a lapped car.
Wow, goodness gracious me. So all happening just as we come back from this ad break. Let's have a look at what's happened to our race leader, Ethan Gregot, here on Conrod Straight. He was just about due to come in from what would have been that car's second pit stop. And yes, it was the lapped car. Bang, nose to tail contact. And that's going to be big damage. And wow, how lucky was James Scott to avoid colliding with the back of Ethan Grigot's stranded machine, and then he spun as a result of having to take evasive action. So that's all unfolded ahead of him. James Scott, do I go left, do I go right?
Oh, he got hit.
Oh, and he got hit. He got a whack. So, contact and damage for both of our race leaders. Unbelievable.
And they both came straight to the lane. I know for a fact that Benjamin Smith is now in the car in place of Gregot with a spare car. And I suspect they might have grabbed a spare car over at Logitech G Altus Esports as well. Simone Maria Machino jumping in to that BMW. Ian Ford fires out of the lane, keeping control of the Evolution Racing Team car. He's been in for the last few laps, and he comes out just ahead of Glenn Cito Riddell of TM Racing. Jared Filsell hops in the United Sim Sports car, vacated by Jackson Suzel and Harlow. And this race is taking a big shuffle at the front with black flags and incidents and pit stops. This might take a little while to dissect. Currently, the race leader is Ross Rizzo out of Trick Esports. But he is yet to make a pit stop.
Yeah, he'll be due into the pits shortly for what will be that car's second pit stop. Thomas Hinds, the other driver who's a bit out of sequence, but Thomas Hinds can stay on the track for another 5 or 6 laps before he has to take his next pit stop. So the upshot of all this is that the number 13 car of Ian Ford, that's the second of the Evolution Racing Team cars, Ford, Scott Fountain and Riley Preston, is probably going to emerge out of this pit stop shuffle as the effective race leader. And obviously the incidents for the 2 cars that we saw at the chase will have helped his cause, but the other thing as well is because they took tyres in his first pit stop, it means that Ian Ford has not had to change tyres at his second pit stop, so therefore he will get a quicker pit stop than a lot of his rivals, as we see the race-leading 996 car now diving into the pits. Ross Rizzo heading that car over to James Glasspool for the second stint.
And was that Thomas Hinds I saw keep going? Yes, it was. Zuva Racing now into the lead of the race for the moment. There is Albert. He might have actually bought himself a ticket to the lead of the race with that incident up front. Although Cooper Murray did pass him earlier on, and Ian Ford did not take tyres. So Ian Ford will emerge as the race leader. He's currently second on the racetrack. And Jordan Ross, just noticed, has had a crash as I picked him up at Murray's corner, just at the back of the shop there. He's kept it going mostly, but it was an awkward spin. He's got damage to the back of the car that he had before the contact just a second ago, which is what I was going to highlight, but I guess we'll look at the incident instead now.
So all changing at the front, driver changes taking place in a lot of our leading contenders as we have a look at what happened with Jordan Ross. It's been a fraught race for that team so far. The Synergy Sim Racing outfit. He was on the inside. Oh, so there's another car that's just not realised that he was on the inside and has turned into him on the approach to Murray's corner. So that's why those 2 cars made contact. Thomas Hinds is your race leader at the moment, but as mentioned, a bit out of sequence on pit strategy. Ian Ford in second position. We expect him to vault to the top of the order once a couple more pit stops take place. Glenn Seto Riddell currently in position number 3 on pretty much the same strategy as Thomas Hinds. Bo Albert 4th. The other car that's come up, the number 45 car, which was driven in the opening stint by Josh Burden, and was sort of hovering just outside the top 10. Nathan Puppets is now at the wheel of that car, and it's moved up to position number 5 as a result of that second round of pit stops. Then we go back to Cody Bircher, who's now taken over from Cooper Murray at the wheel of car number 36, and we've got a car spun at Forest Elbow.
Not good. Not a good spot. No. Oh, lucky. Very lucky. The initial contact between Ethan Grigault and it was Nathan Button that he came into contact with at the chase has been deemed a racing incident, but the re-entry from Button, who I thought looked like he was out of control and spinning, has earned him a drive-through, so that's interesting.
So just running through the rest of the order, Jordan Ross in 8th position, Braden Nash in 9th, and Simone Maria Marcheno rounding out the top 10 at this stage, having climbs behind the wheel of the OSR Sports machine.
I just spotted that incident from Wheeler actually resulted in a change of position between AUTOSERV Sports and Evolution Racing Team. Talk about opportunistic from Marcheno. Look at this. That's the Evolution car in front.
So it was Ben Smith, wasn't it?
Yep.
And Ben Smith's actually lost a further position to Andrew Dyson as well. Actually, yes, Andrew Dyson was already ahead of Marcheno, so there's been another change in position down at the chase there as well.
So Marcheno puts a car between himself and Benjamin Smith. The race just suddenly exploded a little bit in the last few minutes. David Riddell down on the lane. And Thomas Hinds continues for some more time. So, your take on the back markers so far in this one? Lockie, they've played a big part, haven't they?
They have, and I talked before about the fact that it is up to the race leaders to safely negotiate their way through the back markers, but I also made the point that the back markers need to be predictable with their driving to minimise the risk of the race leaders running into them, and I just have the feeling that the incident at the chase that we saw with Ethan Grigault, it might have been a back marker who was a bit wayward and a bit unpredictable with his movements on the circuit, which has caused that incident.
One of the cars we saw having some issues a little bit earlier on is the Synergy Sim Racing number 2 that was being driven by Scotty Nolan. We've got Nolan with us here in the booth now. How are you, Scott? It's been an interesting and rough start to the race for you.
Yeah, it's gone in 2 parts really. The start of the race went really well for all 3 of our cars. We all sort of either maintained position or moved forward, and we're all maintained our place in the top 15 under those first few safety cars. But 2 of the team cars had a bit of trouble together and came together, and that pushed us. We were about 7th, and then we got some contact under the safety car from someone, and it upset the rear end, and we ended up glancing the wall, and so we're a bit hampered with some straight line and that. But we've taken the repair, and we're back out here in 25th, still on the lead lap, and we're going to fight back to the front.
What's the mood like in the team after that incident? I know it wasn't your car, but it was the other 2 involved. They crashed into each other. One of them then got a black flag from it. It was a really rough period of time. The other one then came out of pit lane and put it in defence. How's the general team spirits at Synergy right now?
Look, we're still all right. We brush it off. J. Ross, Jordan, who was in the 14 car, was really apologetic to Glenn. It was just, for some reason, we always seem to have cars together, and we had 3 in the top 15 shootout, which was awesome. All 3 of the boys that were in that did a really good job. So we've got to be mindful that could happen, and unfortunately it did. It was just a mistake from Jordan, and he was fresh in the car on used tyres, so probably, not a really good strategy call there, but he apologised. Glenn obviously seen red and, wanted to sort of, as Posy does, put the foot down and try and get back to the front. But they've retired that car. Posy's probably a little bit disappointed, but, we just push on now.
It's looked as if you've been struggling. I know you said you've had a decent start to the race, but we certainly saw at a couple different times throughout the race so far, you just sliding down the order like no tomorrow. What's the biggest attribute towards that? Because at times you've had pace, and other times it's looked like you've had nothing.
Yeah, so at the start of the race, we'll comfortably sort of in the mid to low threes. Myself, on that last safety car we started, I think Ian was behind us. I think we were in the top 7 in the last safety car restart, and we copped some rear end damage. And then I think the second lap under the safety car, I had a lap car in front of me check up more than I thought coming into the Forest Elbow. I glanced the front left on the inside wall of Forest Elbow, and it just hurt the straight line. So we just battled on them for the stint, knowing that we were going to go backwards because we didn't want to pitch straight away and obviously take the repair. So we battled on. We came in a couple of laps ago when the fuel ended, and we've put Pickles, Michael, in the car, who's a weapon in anything he drives. It doesn't matter how long he's out of the car for. And we're going to charge forward, and obviously we got the man Hobbo 88 to come next.
Pickles. Lockie, you got any questions for Scotty?
In terms of tyres, how are you finding the tyre wear? Are you guys mostly double stinting your tyres, or are you finding that the conditions are a bit too tough to do that?
We double stinted. So the stop up till when I got out of the car, which was not that long ago, we were on the same set of tyres for the whole race. We feel like with the cooler conditions at the start of the race, you can probably do it. It'd be interesting to see what cars do as it comes to the middle. When in qualifying yesterday, we saw temperatures in the 50s. So I'm not sure. It's 28 seconds extra in the pit. So but how much do you lose on track? So it's one of those things that we're just going to keep an eye on. We'll definitely keep an eye up and down the field on who's going to do it or not. Obviously, the front cars are, the front 6 or 7 are just weapons, and they're the guys to beat, and they've got the best drivers, GT drivers in Australia, driving those cars. So they're definitely guys that could probably double stint the whole race. And but we'll just wait and see. But at the moment, the plan is to double stint as much as we can.
How are you finding the traffic out there? Obviously, it's a big field of cars today, and a fair bit of variation in pace between the fastest and the slowest cars. How are you finding managing the traffic?
Yeah, it's the same boat for everyone. We just got to do the best we can. A few guys, especially for us, when we were down on speed, I felt like a bit of a roadblock, but we didn't want to, we're not just going to pull over either. So a few guys are pretty gamey with just showing the nose and stuff like that. And a few of the more experienced drivers will notice that. But some of the inexperienced guys are sort of, I've got a feeling they might be, turning in a bit and sort of the guy, it's the same for everyone. You just got to manage it. In the real life 12 hour, there's a big spread of pace as well, I believe. So, it's just something we've got to manage. I just think it's an awesome event. I think OSR have done a really good event, and I was really excited that I could get behind and support it this year as well. And, we really just want to aim for a top 15, and if we get a top 10, it's going to be a dream today.
Just having a look at an incident here. Mark Fee completely blowing the brake marker, and, well, I don't know what he where he thought he was going there, but he's gone straight up the back of the Ferrari in front of Justin Quinn, and both of them have gone spearing off into the gravel, and a safety car has been deployed. Thank you for joining us, Scotty. Go well the rest of the race, and best of luck.
Thanks. I just seen our car just collect the stricken car at McPhillamy, so we are not good either. So anyway, I'll go back and we'll dissect that, and thanks for the chat, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. So we've seen an incident down at the Chase, and we've seen another one apparently at McPhillamy, which has involved Michael Schreier, which I suspect is the one to bring out the safety car.
Also, Nathan Huppert's in car number 45 must have been involved in an incident as well, because that car's come into the pits after just 6 laps, and it was running comfortably inside the top 10 at the time. So a few incidents that were happening while we were having that chat with Scott, and safety cars back on track.
They're trying to pick up, bless you, Lockie.
I'm allergic to safety cars, clearly.
What happened to Schreier? McFlummy was the call from Nolan there. Sounds like it may have been a decent-sized crash, as Phil Sells just jokingly called for the medic, I think, over in-game. Hopefully his car's not involved, because that is the one that led the race early.
Yeah, well, Jared Phil Sells actually moved back up into 3rd position. We've had a few pit stops taking place under this safety car. So the race leader, Thomas Hinds, came in. The other car that was in 2nd position came in for a pit stop as well. So we do now have a pretty much effectively cleansed field in terms of all of our front-running cars being pretty much on the same strategy at this point. But we're hearing that for the number 45 car, which had Nathan Huppert's at the wheel, there was an internet dropout issue for that car, so that's why it went disappearing down the timing. They've come in and they've done a driver change. Chris Pellet is now behind the wheel of the number 45 machine.
Now, this is Nathan Button. What has happened to him? Is he the victim of the concrete that sucks you in at Reed Park? I feel like Michael Schreier might be coming along in a second. And I feel like Schreier might be in for a rough ride. Nah. Oh, here comes Schreier. It's a tough corner, because if you're committed to that wide line up against the concrete, you can't do much to react, Lockie.
No, you're fully committed through there, and it's a blind crest as well. So again, if there's a car that's stopped, you're not going to know that it's there until...
Oh, he was making his own mistake anyway. Oh. So Schreier was gone regardless of the car and the fence. That is a bizarre, actually. So he was wide of the apex. I wonder if he was distracted by the yellow flags on the screen or something, because he was having his own rough time. Look at that, way offline.
Yep, it was just the rear of his car that clipped the Ferrari that was already stranded up against the fence. It's been an absolute misery for the Synergy Sim Racing team, an absolute shocker with all 3 of their cars involved in incidents, and we're not even a quarter of the way into the race yet.
Wow. So, field neutralized. Ian Ford, his advantage slashed. It was 25 seconds looking at the racing leaderboard right now, but it's no longer 25 seconds. And he is up behind the Porsche safety car.
And there's a heap of lapped cars in between him and our 2nd place car of Bo Albert as well. So
yeah,
at the restart, Ian Ford's going to have a big advantage. Look at the lapped cars. There's at least 5 or 6 back markers in between Ford and Albert. So when we resume the race, like I say, it'll be a big advantage for Ian Ford, because he will have that buffer back to the cars behind. Jared Phil Sell, who's taken over from Jackson Sousa and Harlow, who sits in position number 3. The second of the AUTOSERV Sports cars, Simone Marie Marcheno, is on board that car that was driven by James Scott in the opening stint. Then we go back to Ben Smith in at the Evolution Racing Team machine, currently sitting in position 5. Andrew Dyson's worked his way up to 6th position in the DPR Sim Racing machine. Back then to Derek in car number 8. Gutschel, McKnight and Harmsworth rounding out the top 10. And for Jason Harmsworth, he's taken over from Thomas Hinds in that car. They're a little bit out of sequence compared to everybody else, because they only just took their most recent pit stop. So they've got about 5 laps of fuel on board extra compared to all of the cars ahead of them on the racetrack. So for the Zuba racing machine, it's actually not in a bad strategic position at the moment. Had an incident at the chase a bit earlier on in the race where Thomas Hinz was an innocent victim, and that car's made a total of 4 pit stops in this race, but they've done a good job of fighting back into contention. Cody Burgess just drops back a bit as well. In fact, he's come in for another stop, the number 36 car, so yeah, not quite sure what the story... Oh, yeah, they must have decided to come in under this safety car to top up with fuel in car number 36. So Cooper Murray vacated that car about 8 or 9 laps ago. Cody Birch has come back in under the safety car for another splash and dash. So that's another car that's a bit out of sequence on strategy, but we know that they've got plenty of pace on board that car as well.
Keep an eye on the R1 Sim Sports car, Lockie. Race
has been so far. What a shame we're not on air for the entire 12 hours.
Yeah. It has been a very good race so far. So Reese Gasul's hopped into the R1 Sim Sports car. He qualified that machine yesterday. He looked very quick across both the 90-minute session and the shootout, which unfortunately you couldn't see, Lockie, as you were emceeing an event. You will see this afternoon's finish. I won't, because I will be emceeing an event. But you'll have the final 3 hours of coverage here on SimSpeed TV. I believe the plan is for a bit of a static shot of the track going up for 6 hours in between over on Facebook on SimSpeed Esports Network. If you go and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter there. But this should be interesting, because there is a lot of laps cars, as you mentioned earlier. Greg James, Kyle Zink, Reese Dickerson, John Baldwin, Max Havett, Shane Nowens are all in between Ian Ford and Bo Albert. Now that has many issues, least of which is the gap between them. The one I'm worried about is the logjam on the mountain. Jared Filsell is going to want to get by Albert. There's a couple of laps cars behind him. Then comes Marcheno and Smith and Dyson, lapped cars, and yeah, this is a very, very jumbled lineup for this restart, Lockie. Restart number 4 of the day. 4 or 5, I've lost count already.
And good strategy from the Evolution Racing team so far to get that car into the lead of the race, and it's been a very sensible stint from the drivers in that car as well. They've stayed out of trouble, but they've also had good pace. We've got an incident on Conrod Straight. You are kidding me. That's one of the Synergy Sim Racing cars again, as we get back underway here for race start number 4 for the Bathurst 12 hour. Ian Ford leads the way. We have to look to the back of the shop to find our second place car of Bo Albert. And he will have fired up Jared Filsell right on his tail. There's Jason Harmsworth in 10th position with Cody Bircher for company. Both of those cars on a similar strategy, having stopped under the most recent safety car. And there is Jared Filsell, the United Sim Sports entry, trying to follow Bo Albert through the lap's traffic. Shortly going to be saying that log jam effects that Ryan Jones was talking to us about as they negotiate their way over the top of the mountain. And if you're in one of the laps cars, it's a pretty tricky situation, because you're very much concentrating on your own race and potentially your own battles. You don't exactly want to be moving out of the way to let people through, but look at Bo Albert tucked up behind one of the Ferraris over the top of the mountain. He's got his windscreen full of the backmarker Ferrari, but he's got his rear view camera full of Jared Filsell's United Sim Sports BMW. Down the hill they head through the S's and the Dipper. Oh wow, anxious moments here for these contenders. They have to be patient. They can't afford to make contact, but they also can see the race leader disappearing further up the road, and Filsell's going to go the long way to the outside at Forest Elbow. Not the way to go around there. There's not a lot of grip when you get out close to that concrete wall. Bo Albert finally is going to slip on past that backmarker Ferrari down Conrod Straight, and a look at Filsell tucking into the slipstream. Here he comes. He says, "I've got you," and he comes ranging up on the inside of Bo Albert into the kick. A change in second position, and there goes Tangle. contact between our second and third place cars, and Jared Filsell was off the road and in the gravel at the chase.
Huge check up behind. It's put Marchino and Benjamin Smith alongside each other as well. It's all messy. And this is completely on Filsell, I've got to say. He went for the move. There was a car there, nowhere for Albert to go. Turned himself across the nose. And just too ambitious at this point. And this is the check-up it caused with Marchino and Benjamin Smith. And I've heard a crash and another one's off at turn 1. Who's that? Is it one of the lapped cars or is it a race leader? They're facing the wrong way. It looks like it might be Andrew Dyson. It is from 6th place. Oh, this restart has kicked off in a big, big way. And it's continuing on down Mountain Straight towards turn 2 as we grab another modem simulation replay. It was the big squeeze in towards Hell Corner. And it did not work out for Dyson.
That all unfolded because the field was bottled up because of the incident that happened at the chase. They were 3 wide. Oh, Dyson was on the inside. The car that was on his outside had to turn left to try and turn in the Hell Corner, but didn't realise that Dyson was alongside. And unfortunately for the DPR Simrigs.com machine, which had such a great run up to that point, it's now got damage, you would imagine, and will be headed back to the pits for a fairly lengthy pit stop. And John Derrick, who's now on board the BMW Team Schnitzel entry, was being driven by Luke Rosella early on, up in position 5.
Greg James with them all stacked up behind. I was looking further down at McLeod and Filsell as well. This is one of the issues with restarts deep in a race. So many laps cars in the way. This is what I was talking about. There's McLeod and Filsell. They've got their own mess of cars to get through. I think we've got to start giving wave around to laps cars for the next few restarts because this is just too messy, I think, Lockie.
Yeah, it's a hard one though, isn't it? Because it's not a case of you just wave around all the lapped cars, because you've got all different cars on different laps, and it would probably take you quite a bit of time to be able to manage all of that. So, not an easy situation. And I mean, in real life, in the real Bathurst 12 hour, they don't give lapped cars a wave around either, as we've got another car off the road at the chase, I think just getting nudged out of the way there by Jared Filsell. So, yeah, not quite sure what the solution is there, apart from the fact that if you're leading the race, you have to negotiate your way safely around the back markers. It's part of endurance racing. It's part of what you have to know how to do. This
is wild. Dave Clements cops the drive through for an incident on lap 67, 3 laps ago. There's McKnight looking up the inside of Greg James. Followed through by Jason Harmsworth, Dion Peters. James Glasspool wants a piece of it. And Guy Leach is going around the outside at the cutting, ambitious as ever. And Greg James is just trying to stay as far away from the racing line as possible at the moment. As Walpole gets by under the tree. Neil Pearson wants to go around the outside past Solman and Reed Park. Oh, man. Braden Nash slips through. Here comes one of the Synergy cars into the back of him. That's Michael Schreier at Skyline. He looks for a move and gets shut down. He's under pressure from Simon Nicholson as well. Schreier's a laps down car who's actually got pace at the moment. He's 32nd. He's fighting James for position. That's why James shut the door on him at Skyline. And here comes Filsell on the back of the train as well, Lockie.
Well, yeah, Jared Filsell will be fired up, obviously, after the incident down at the chase, but it was rather ambitious, it has to be said, because he moved in the braking zone and left Bo Albert with nowhere to go. But Jared Filsell, despite the spin down at the chase, he still hasn't lost too much. He's still sitting in 15th position. Challenge for him now is going to be safely negotiating his way through all of these other cars without any further incidents or damage. Ian Ford, meanwhile, just to give you an idea of how much clear track can work to your advantage, look at that. There he is. He's got the racetrack all to himself. He's got a 7.1 second margin over Bo Albert in second position. And he's going to be sitting out there laughing about all of the carnage that's unfolded behind him because he's
Safety
been
car.
well and truly clear of it. And we've got another safety car. Safety cars, great safety cars. It's a cliche that we use in endurance racing here at Mount Panorama, and that is why Frank Hodak hard into the fence at the top of the circuit on the exit of McPhillamy Park.
Here
And
comes Ian Ford.
we're only 2.5 hours into this race, and we're going to have safety car appearance number 5.
The Gentleman Sim Racing Club car, the culprit of another incident. Have they used up all their
Oh no! Oh,
Was that Hemsworth?
the number 21 car was involved in that one as well. That was Gasul, wasn't it? I think. No. Oh no, sorry, my apologies. It was Fevin in car number 24, which was already down the order.
24th spot. The Mark 1 Esports white car. 755.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens here in terms of pit strategy, because our race leaders are coming up to about halfway through what would be a normal stint on a tank of fuel. So it's kind of a 50-50 call about whether or not you pit, and here we go. So our race leader, Ian Ford, has decided to come in. Our second place man, Bo Albert, has decided not to. Simone Marie Marcheno is in. Ben Smith is in as well. Cody Birch is going to come in. They're going to top that car up again. Reese Gasul has stayed out. So a variety of strategies playing out here.
Alright, vacate the racetrack and clear the roads because Scott Fontaine is jumping in the car. And this can only go one way. Badly.
So you were talking before about the fact that we had a mixed-up field with back markers. Well, we're now going to have a mixed-up field not only with back markers, but with a variety of different strategies as well. This is going to completely jumble up the race.
All I can say
of this safety car
is good luck, Reese, and you, when you jump back in after 6 more hours of running later on.
So the likes of Jared Philsell and Andrew Dyson, who were down the order due to incidents earlier on, they've all come into the pits at this point, which is a sensible call. They were buried in the field. They're not going to lose a whole lot in terms of track position, so they might as well come in, top the car up with fuel, and get themselves into a position where they can run longer than all of their rivals. So the upshot of all of this is, you know who leads the race now? Bo Albert in car number 83, one of the Logitech G Altus Esports machines. Reese Gasul now moves up into second position. That's the car that was driven by John Peasnick earlier on in the race. We saw that they were penalised for pit lane speeding. They fell way down the order. They fought back with great distinction. And the Team Schnitzel BMW, which we saw backwards at Forest Elbow earlier on in the race when Luke Rosella was driving. John Derrick now at the wheel of that car, and it runs inside the top 3. So we always see this sort of thing in endurance racing, where the ebb and flow of the race and the different strategies and the rise and fall of different combinations means that different drivers have their chance to experience some time at the front of the field over the course of the day.
Oh, endurance racing never fails to perform, does it? And this is going to be fun. Hey, I'm interested to see how Fonty goes, actually, Scott Fontaine. I've never seen him on the racetrack before. And now he's jumping into a car that was leading the race before the stop. So this is going to be eye-opening for me. Fonty, of course, for those somehow still unaware, is the co-owner of SimSpeed. He is the hard-working version of Jay, Who knew exactly what I was going to say before I said it? And crucially, he's actually able to drive a race car in the sim, unlike Jay. So really, he's just better. But so he'll be back in 17th for this restart. Got a lot of work to do, as does Jared Philsell, 19th. Andrew Dyson has handed over to Adam Briggs, now 22nd. Simone Maria Marchino is 11th. Poe Albert leads the race from Reese Gasol and John Derrick McKnight.
And once again, Ryan, we've ended up with a situation where there's massive lapped cars in between our race leader and the second place car. So just as we saw at the previous safety car, it'll be an advantage for Bo Albert because of the buffer that he's got over the second place driver at this restart.
Yeah. A warning given by race control there for the Constantina effect that last restart we saw caught out the Synergy Sim racing car.
It's all very good to give warnings, but I'm not quite sure specifically what the drivers are supposed to do.
Not check up.
Oh, so that was the Constantina that happened on Conrod Straight. Yes.
Under the safety car, yes.
Yeah.
Alright. Gonna get a restart this lap. And once again, a lot of lapped cars in the mix. And this time, a lot of faster cars even further back. So I could anticipate only more chaos on this one compared to the most recent restart. Crucial thing to remember is there's still 9 hours and 23 minutes to go.
Time flies when you're having fun. We've been on air now for approaching 3 hours, and I can't remember any stage of this race that we would describe as being boring. There's always been something happening. There's always been something to talk about. Been enthralling stuff so far.
Just saw the safety car disappear over the crest. Conrod Straight. Roller coaster that is the run from Forest Elbow towards the chase. And Bo Albert will be in control of the field in the Astro Gaming Altus Esports number 83. Remember I highlighted the lack of pace that Albert's had comparative to everyone else, but been elevated up thanks to the brilliant first stint of Webster. Well, it's worked out well for him at the moment. He's going to restart with a big gap back to second, courtesy of the laps cars, and should be able to skip away, at least quite comfortably for a little while. If I were him, I'd go as early as possible. But I am not him, and looks like he's going to go quite late. Out of the last corner. On the throttle, away we go. Another restart for the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12 hour. You're on SimSpeed TV. And already there are cars alongside each other as we try to filter out the lapped cars. Reese Gasol picking up a spot.
And once again, this is almost like starting a new race all over again, because you're going to have drivers who are in for their first stint of the day, and it's going to just take them a bit of time to get themselves up to speed, get themselves into the zone, understand exactly what sort of car they've got underneath them, and understand where they are in the overall context of the race.
That was a very slow car on Mountain Straight. I think James Mooney just fired out of pit lane right into the restart traffic. And he was getting swamped down at the straight. Steady on, because there's going to be some very awkwardness in a moment for Braden Nash, who's having to pick his way through a couple very slow moving cars. One of them is James Mooney in front of him now, who's finally got up to speed. And Nash is watching Glasspool up there disappear away from him. Whoa! That was close. A check-up from Mooney, a bit of oversteer. Nash almost helps him into the fence. That would have been a big one if that had made contact with the concrete in front of the field.
Once again, it's a big conga line of cars over the top of the mountain. Thankfully, they all seem to have safely negotiated their way through the first lap of this safety car restart this time, and it's a 4.1 second advantage in favour of Bo Albert, our race leader. Down into the chase. This is Cody Bircher. Remember, he came in for a top-up of fuel under safety car, which is why that car fell outside the top 10. Cody Bircher up behind the car of Glenn Riddell, and he's been turned. What on earth was that backmarker doing? Just turned straight into the side of Cody Bircher's car. And it's Bircher who goes into the sand at Murray's corner. James Mooney just turned in like there was nobody alongside him. And Cody Bircher will have been going, what on earth was that all about? Let's have a look at this on the replay. So Glenn Riddell was up the inside. Cody Bircher's there as well. Oh, he got onto the grass at the turning point, James Mooney, and that's caused his Ferrari to flick hard left into the side of Cody Bircher's car. Cody Bircher and Cooper Murray, they've had pace today, and we've got Timothy Febben on his roof in the chase. And you know what this means, Ryan? It means that we're quite possibly headed for safety car number 6.
Yeah, I mean, it was called about 30 seconds ago while we were looking at that replay. Shall I bring this up? The record for the most safety cars that we've had in the real life Bathurst 12 hour was 20 safety cars in 2015. We're not even a quarter of the way of the race yet, and we've already had 6 safety cars. So if we continue at the current rate of safety cars, we might be on track to break that record. Here's a look at what happened to Timothy Febben. Oh, jeez. Got tangled up with another car and tripped into an awkward rollover. Unbelievable. Alright. Something needs to be done about this, because this is getting ridiculous. These lapped cars, Timothy Febben, that was just a ridiculously stupid move, trying to get up the inside there. I don't think he was a lapped car, but he was trying to get by a lapped car that was on the defensive line. Look at Simon Francis here. Into the chase, he moves across. What on earth? Why? There's no reason. And there's also a team we've seen involved in almost every safety car so far, which is running at the back of the field. They've been involved with just about everything so far. They need to pull their head together. And I don't know what James Mooney was doing on that restart as well, because he just absolutely dawdled. He didn't come out of pit lane. He was just dawdling for no reason other than being too conservative, or I don't know what he was doing, but in the end, he's caused the crash. And here we are again under safety car, due to lapped cars just showing no awareness of what's around them.
A couple of pit stops happening, so John Derrick has come into the pits, so too has Daniel Pearson. Chris Pellet in the pits as well. If you've got a race like this where there's lots of safety car interventions in quick succession, it can actually often be quite a smart option just to keep hitting every time there's a safety car and keep topping up with fuel, because when the race does eventually restart and we do eventually get a longer period of green flag running, it means you'll be able to run longer than all of your opponents and actually could work out well for you towards the end of the day. So 6 safety car interventions we've had so far in 2 hours and 43 minutes of racing. You would hope that we'll get some extended periods of green flag running.
Well, eventually...
Yeah, eventually, yes.
Eventually, the culprits that keep causing these incidents are going to run out of spare cars and get shuffled out of the field. So once we're left with level-headed racers who can keep their awareness of what's happening around them, we should be able to get going again and get some good racing in towards the last half of this race. But it's just poor. There's been some poor just driving. Even in qualifying yesterday, there was just some real lack of awareness being shown. And it's disappointing, Lockie, because there's some fantastic drivers in this field. And at the front, well, even the front's been affected by the lapped cars. We've seen some phenomenal racing.
So we're going to have a restart this time around by the looks of it. So a very quick safety car intervention to retrieve that stranded car from the chase. And Reece Gasol has managed to negotiate his way through some of the laps cars that were between him and our race leader Bo Albert before the previous safety car intervention. So a bit less of a buffer for Bo Albert this time around, but still a few back markers between him and our second place driver. Jamie McKnight is in position 3. We go back to Harmsworth, Glasspool, Nash, Walpole, Marchano, Nicholson and McLeod. That's the top 10 at the moment, but a big variety of different strategies being employed as we get into our final 15 minutes of coverage for this first stage of the 2020 virtual Bathurst 12 hour here on the SimSpeed TV network. The safety car is in pit lane, and it's going to be Bo Albert in the AUTOSERV sports car who will lead the field back around to the start-finish line to get us back underway. Restart number 6 here for the Oceanic Sim Racing Bathurst 12 hour presented by Smith & Sons. Mount Panorama.
Not quite.
No, we don't have a restart. I've jumped the gun there. So they have decided not to restart the race this time around, and we'll be spending another lap behind the safety car.
I wasn't paying enough attention. I'm not convinced they ever allowed the car to get away. I think Albert's just
That's why we haven't restarted, because the car that caused this safety car is still there. Now it finally gets towed back to the pits. So I've thought that if you were the race leader, you were not supposed to leave too much space to the safety car. So I'd like to see Bo Albert actually be a little bit closer to the safety car, isn't it? You're supposed to be within 10 car lengths of the safety car?
in theory. But least of the worries for race control, I suspect. How's that sun getting brighter and whiter over the course of this broadcast as well? I suspect we're going to restart this lap though. So there's one laps car between Albert and Gasol. There are 2, 3 laps cars between Gasol and McKnight. That's second and third. Fourth is right behind him. Another laps car, then fifth, sixth, laps car, 7th, 8th, 9th, laps car, 10th.
I'll tell you what, remember how I was talking about the race distance record earlier on? With this number of safety cars, we're not going to get near that. I'll give you that tip. In fact, we'll do well to get to the 300 lap mark based on the rate at which the drivers are completing laps at the moment.
Yeah, I think you can put away the fastest lap. Fastest distance, longest distance stats away for this one today, Lockie. I think that's safely out of the equation. Looks like the safety car's going to pull away. Albert's told to maintain his pace of 30 car lengths behind the pace car. As long as it's being consistent and it's not too much drama. I think keeping this distance behind the safety car, Lockie, is actually preventing some of the checkups from happening, which start with the leader stopping and starting behind the pace car that then balloon down the order. Our Bo's just holding a nice steady pace, and the Porsche pace car's pulling away. What do you reckon? Can you do it this lap, Lockie? Can we get a restart?
Let's hope so. Let's hope we can have a nice clean restart and hopefully some sustained green flag running.
Albert in control, looking for another restart, lap 77 of this Bathurst 12 hour, thanks to Smith & Sons. 9 hours, 11 minutes, 18 seconds left on the clock. We go back green.
Looks like everybody just giving themselves a little bit more room this time around. You can see that the field's a bit more spread out as they run down into Hill Corner. I think that all of the drivers have probably been given a fairly stern talking to by our race director, and just to warn them not to be causing unnecessary incidents. Race control will be a bit sick of having to constantly deploy the safety car and deal with smashed cars on the racetrack.
James Glasspool and Braden Nash fighting for position just behind what we're seeing on screen as Jason Harnsworth follows McKnight by the laps car of Joseph Yates, who is now in front of Glasspool and Nash. Steady. Patience. Patience. Yates clearly off pace, but Glasspool happy to wait. That is good. There's 9 hours left in this race. No need to make a move across the top of the mountain. Or down it, for that matter. Although he will be concerned about Braden Nash right up behind him.
Oh no, and here we go. John Derrick.
God.
Oh wow, so the BMW Team Schnitzel car, which has been up and down the timesheets all day like a yo-yo. It's run as high as 3rd, it's run as low as 45th. And now looks to have been involved in an incident heading down the mountain. Let's have a look at what's happened here. So he's in quite a congested bunch of cars. And he's always been hit from behind. Braden Nash gets into the back of him at Skyline and hangs in the fence.
That was Maverick Benson, but Braden Nash did get into the back of Joseph Yates at the bottom of the mountain. Which is what I saw live. Yeah, so Benson. At least it wasn't a lapped car, Lockie.
Really unfortunate because he had come into the pits, Derek, under the last safety car to top up with fuel. He was running in the top 3 before that, but it was as a result of that last pit stop that he got buried in the cut and thrust at the mid-pack, which is why he was involved in that incident. Now, we do actually have a battle on for the lead here, so Bo Albert has been caught by Reece Gasol, and he is actually going to have to start doing a bit of defence here, Bo Albert, if he wants to hold on to the lead of this race. There's only 4/10 of a second between 1st and 2nd, and Reece Gasol was half a second quicker than Bo Albert on the previous lap, so Reece Gasol, the RT Simsports Ferrari, has a pretty decent turn of speed at the moment.
Joseph Yates finally got himself going after being looped by Nash at the exit of the chase. After Nash had made a pretty good move on Glasspool and a slightly less good move on Yates. This could be on down at that exact spot here. Is Gasol close enough to get a bit of a slingshot up onto the back of Albert and go by him? And if he does he want to? Or does he want to sit in here and just save a little bit of fuel? Either way, this is a fantastic drive back up the order from Gasol and from Peasnick and Part as well, after they were down the order a little bit early on. And they've got 7.5 seconds in hand over 3rd place on back. On. That's Murray Walpole, and there's another victim off from the gravel, Benjamin Smith, and there was a 3rd one in the gravel I saw as well. That was Simon Nicholson. Man.
Few lapses in concentration starting to happen, isn't there, as we approach quarter race distance, and we'll have a look at a replay of what happened. I think there's a bit more to that story because Walpole was all sideways and crossed up at the chase.
I swear to God, if this is
feeling that there's more laps cars involved again. Unfortunately, Ryan. Yep. Oh, Ben Smith. He went off the road to try and take evasive action, but ended up ploughing into the side of the stricken Ferrari.
Who got into the back of Walpole there?
BMW.
There we
They
go.
battle for position.
I hope so. Oh, come on, Dion. Why? And that's taking out Benjamin Smith as well from that pack. You saw Smith get a little piece of Walpole's rear end in the gravel.
So the answer to that question is no, they weren't battling for position because that BMW was a lap down. So if you're a back marker, being involved in incidents like that with cars that are on the late lap, that's a big no-no, and I think we'll be in strife with race control for that.
Back up front, clear of lap car drama, Bo Albert and Reece Gasol. The closest fight we've seen from the lead since the two-car fight for the lead was decimated by a lapped car when it was Ethan Gregault and James Scott. Roles were reversed. At that point, it was the Altus car chasing an Evolution Racing Team car. This time, it's Altus leading an R1 Sim Sports car. But Gasol, clearly the quicker of the two. On the previous lap, he was about a tenth of a second quicker. Albert's got his hands full. Move into turn 2. I would suspect the chase at the end of this lap could be the spot for Gasol if he doesn't want to save fuel in behind him. He looks so much quicker than him. I don't think it's worth saving at this point. He's just getting held up dramatically. He could pull away by a long way here with the advantage they've got behind. Crucially, Bo's got the pace that he's actually pulling away from McKnight in third. So he's managed to luck out here with the drivers he's up against in the top 10 now, Lockie, and he's quicker than third on back. The gap's out to 9 seconds. It was 7 just a couple laps ago.
And on that note, Ryan, I'm going to love you and leave you. I've to duck off for my next commitment, but look forward to rejoining everyone to call the final 3 hours of the race at about 5 o'clock this evening.
All right. It'll be Lachlan rejoining Reece later on this evening. Thank you for joining us, Lockie. We'll see you a little bit later. And I want to carry this to the next 3 minutes. I want to see if there's a move for the lead here. But then I will love and leave as well. For the rest of the race. We'll be back with full coverage as well for the last 3 hours. Lachlan Mantle and Reece Gardner there. We'll be covering that here on SimSpeed TV. Hopefully by then, some of these backmarkers have sorted themselves out or filtered themselves out of the race. Been a little bit disappointing, the mess we've seen in that regard, but nonetheless, there are some beacons of light with some of the racing we've seen. Competitiveness up the front is phenomenal, and once some of the guys like Vilsel and Marcheno and those teams and Riddell cycle back towards the front of the field, it could be an almighty scrap as Benson just copped a black flag for causing an incident back on lap 78. Here we go. Gasol's right there. Gasol's right there, Jake. Back to the lead. Up the inside at turn 2. And a new race leader at Bathurst. Reece Gasol at R1 Sim Sports takes it away from Bo Albert and Astro Gaming Altus Esports. And that is the move made. And a new race leader. Here's the Modem Simulation replay. This was Braden Nash getting himself up into third place by taking it away from Jamie McKnight. Got the exit out of Murray's corner very nicely. Carried it down the front straight, and with the preferred line into turn 1, it was pretty easy. And then Reece Gasol sucking up to the back of the BMW in the slipstream. The Ferrari crouched down underneath the roof line of that Beamer. Tucks out and gets the move done pretty easily in the end. Well, with that move for the lead, then I wanted to see out. I will step away as well. So a big thank you to everyone for tuning in over the first 3 hours of this. This stream will be going down in a minute, but over on Facebook, we'll have a 6-hour coverage up of just static shots around the racetrack, I reckon. So you can at least see what's happening. And if you see everyone all together at one point, the safety car's out, because that's what's just happened right now. Safety car's back out. Let's just hold for a second, see if we can spot if this is another car. Yep, it is. Car on the fence, Stephen Fawkes. That's the, where is that? Is that the exit of the chase? It is, on the right-hand side, on the run to Murray's corner. That's the third car we've seen stuck in the fence today. Very bizarre that we've seen that today. Let's grab the replay up. So he's got cars pretty close proximity either side of him. Fox is 2 laps down. His own mistake off the exit, oversteer, and into the concrete. His engine's just popped and live pictures as well. So he'll have to take a tow back to the pits. But with the safety car out, with 9 hours to go, I will step away. Thank you all for tuning in. Go and have a like of the SimSpeed Sports Network Facebook page. Check out a Facebook stream in a minute. And for now, it's goodbye. We'll see you all later with Reese Gardner and Lockie Mansell for the final 3 hours of the Smith & Sons Bathurst 12 Hour here on SimSpeed TV.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction. He got rid of the outside. Both of them. Maloney.
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my God. Oh, big crash. Oh my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Section's very close. These guys are going to want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no. That's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?